No ma haere mai ki te kaunihira o na roto o na Rotorua hui. Morning everyone and welcome to the Community and District Development Committee for the 9th of August. Welcome to our CEOs of our CCOs and our board chairs, as well as to our staff and to those that are joining us on live stream this morning. Just a reminder, councillors, can we please put your mobile phones away and make sure that they are on silent? We'll have a morning break at about 11 a.m. Councillor Wang, could I ask you to open our meeting with a karakia, please?
Tu taua mai I runga, tu taua mai I raro, tu taua mai I roto, tu taua mai I waho. Kia tau ai, te mauritu, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tānaki.
Kia ora, Councillor Wang. Are there any apologies? I have one for the Mayor for lateness, unless she's coming down the hallway. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I may need to leave by 1 o'clock if we're still going at that stage. I have a meeting in Auckland.
Thank you, that's noted. So we'll just note the Mayor's apologies for lateness. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Patterson. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, thank you, that is carried. Are there any declarations of interest this morning? No, there don't appear to be any. Any urgent items that are not on the agenda? No, thank you. Moving now to page 6 of the agenda, which is the confirmation of the minutes for the 12th of July meeting. Can I ask for a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the Community and District Development Committee meeting held 12 July be confirmed as a true and correct record? Thank you, Councillor O'Brien, seconded by Councillor Kiriopa. Are there any amendments to that? If not, I'll put that motion as a true and correct record. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you, that is carried. We're moving on now to the hearings on the Sala Street Reserve revocation. We note that the submissions closed yesterday and the full catalogue of submissions will be available to councillors in due course. However, today we have some submitters that wish to be heard, so in the first instance, can I ask for a mover and a seconder that the report titled Hearing on Sala Street Reserve Revocation be received? Thank you, Councillor Barker, seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you. That is carried. I think our submitters are on Zoom. Not quite there yet. Given that they are not here, I'm just wondering, I know Grant's on a timeline. Sorry, I'll just pause. Morena, do we have a representative from the Regional Council here for the submissions? Morena, are you Elsa? Elsa, do you want to come down and we'll hear your submission first then? So, Morena, Elsa, you're going to speak to the Bay of Plenty Regional Council submission?
Yes, I am.
Welcome. The time limit for the submission is 5 minutes. The submission has been uploaded, councillors, into Stella for you last night or the day before for you to read. So over to you, and Una will give an indication when you've probably got about 30 seconds to go, so if you could wrap it up at about
Hopefully
4.5 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Cool. Tēnā koutou, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Elsa Ware and I'm a Senior Planner at the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. I work in policy for air quality, geothermal and natural hazards. Regional Council supports the return of the subject portion of the reserve to Ngāti Whakaue if it is not being used for the purpose that it was gifted for. However, we do not support the proposal to change the purpose from cemetery to community housing, predominantly on air quality grounds. Air pollution is now recognised by the World Health Organization as the single biggest environmental threat to human health. The young, the elderly, and those with respiratory and cardiovascular illnesses are the most vulnerable. Regional Council continues to work to reduce air pollution in the Rotorua airshed, including from industrial sources, as it is recognised that there is no safe level of particulate matter pollution for human health. However, there are still air quality issues where residential and industrial areas are located closely together. Enabling housing adjacent to industry is not good planning practice. It is also contrary to regional policy statement Policy AQ1A, which directs us to actively discourage locating new sensitive activities, i.e. residential housing, near activities that discharge offensive and objectionable odours, chemical emissions or particulates. Regional Council can only manage discharges to air to a point, and even well-managed industrial sites can have residual effects, or unexpected and uncontrollable discharge from plant failure or adverse weather conditions. And they do naturally contribute to an entirely different amenity than expected in a residential area. Particularly where industry or similar activities are already established, either as permitted activities or through resource consent, our ability to improve air quality is limited and often reliant on long-term solutions, such as plan changes or plant upgrades. Should housing be established on the site, it would be an isolated pocket of residential housing surrounded by incompatible land use, industrial zone to the west, east and northeast, the crematorium to the south, the wastewater treatment plant and composting plant to the north, and 2 state highways bounding the site. All of these activities involve the discharge of odour, particulates and chemical emissions to air. Further, it would expose the future residents to additional impacts on amenity created by these activities, including noise and traffic. As described in the Rotorua District Plan, the features that distinguish the Industrial 1 zone from others include large bulky buildings, high levels of noise, odour, signage and heavy vehicle and car movements. In both our Rotorua and Mount Maunganui airsheds, there are prime examples where poor decision making in the past has resulted in residential areas sited next to industry. Residents of both the Ngāpuna and Whareroa areas have been so clear about the adverse effects that this has had and continues to have on their everyday lives. As detailed in the draft Rotorua Future Development Strategy, Hapu and Ngāpuna reiterated a strong desire to change the land use around their village and relocate the heavy industry, which negatively impacts the people living there. While the FDS does note that relocating industry will be investigated, there are no plans to move any of the industry surrounding this subject site, so as it stands, the proposal will simply repeat the past and literally move the issue about 800 metres down the road. Relocating industry is a long and costly process. It is better to avoid having to remedy such a situation in the first place. In regards to the underlying Residential 1 zoning, it is important to note that essentially all reserves in the city have that, even where they are clearly inappropriate or unable to be used for residential purposes. So this should not be relied upon as being indicative of an intended or appropriate use for a site. It could also be argued that by having such zoning in this location, the district plan is not giving effect to the relevant RPS provisions. In regard to the 2 adjoining state highways, it is acknowledged that, of course, most housing is naturally located next to a road. However, it's generally not expected, and certainly not ideal, that a residential development would be bordered by 2 state highways, with one being a key freight corridor for heavy vehicles. The release of the Health and Air Pollution in New Zealand 3.0 study, commonly referred to as HAPPENS, has highlighted the significant impacts to human health and the associated social costs resulting from NO2, nitrogen dioxide, emissions. Vehicle emissions are noted as being the leading source of NO2 in New Zealand. Regional Council has a very limited ability to manage transport emissions, and so again, avoidance in the first instance is always going to be better than attempting to mitigate the adverse effects. While any population exposed to air pollution may experience health effects, the greatest impact is likely to be borne disproportionately by lower socioeconomic groups who are more likely to contain vulnerable members and live close to busy transport corridors. The proposal would ensure that this is the case. Information submitted with the resource consent application for the crematorium in 2019 included a council report and minutes from the Ngāti Whakaoe Gifted Reserves Protocol Committee, where an application to operate overnight motorhome parking in a golf driving range was declined. This contained statements about the high amenity value of the site being retained as open space and the likely need for the land to be used for ash interments or other cemetery purposes. This, alongside the change of reserve purpose of the site in 2021 from local purpose recreation reserve back to local purpose cemetery reserve, gave Regional Council the understanding that the site would continue to be used for cemetery purposes. Additionally, the site has been shown as conservation or reserve in the draft Future Development Strategy and was not explicitly included in Plan Change 9. Regional Council therefore had not raised these specific concerns earlier, as there was nothing to indicate to us that such a proposal would ever be made. While poor ground conditions, natural hazards and geothermal activity may be able to be engineered around, the adverse air quality impacts of siting incompatible activities together are just unlikely to be avoided or mitigated through such means. The best course of action is to avoid having to try to manage such a situation in the first place. The ongoing experience of existing residential communities stuck next to industry in both Rotorua and the wider Bay of Plenty are living proof.
Thank you, Elsa. Have you just about reached the end of
One more sentence.
Thank you.
And we urge that the long-term ramifications of this decision are really considered, as well as whether there are better options for development and use of the land. Housing is really important, but so is making the right decision at the beginning of a process to ensure that our people, especially our already vulnerable people, are not subject to further harm.
Thank you, Elsa. We actually did allow a little bit of extra time, so unfortunately there's no time for questions, but thank you this morning for coming in and making your submission in person on behalf of the Regional Council. Thank you. We have, unfortunately, Councillor Maxwell, we're on a bit of a time limit this morning and we do have to keep it fair for all submitters, and that is the process that, unfortunately, because Elsa actually spoke slightly over her time, there isn't any time for questions. We're going to ask now for David Tapsell. David, are you ready on Zoom there? Thank you.
Yes, I'm ready. Just checking, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can, David. Morena, okay, so you're going to speak to the...
You can see me?
Only me, yeah.
Sorry, we're just... Councillor Maxwell, maybe if you want to come over here. There's a seat over here. Sorry, we're just getting Councillor Maxwell to be able to see you, David, on the screen.
Sure. I look just the same as yesterday, Trevor.
Thank you, David. So we've got 5 minutes and
yep.
Over to you.
Bye. Thank you. Morning, everybody, and thank you very much for giving me the time to speak to our submission. I just wanted to clarify that I'm the Deputy Chair of the Pukiroa Oruawhata Trust, but I'm here for and on behalf of the collective submission that was put in by Ngāti Whakaue Tribal Lands, Ngāti Whakaue Education Endowment Trust Board, Pukiroa Oruawhata Trust, Ngāti Whakaue Assets Trust, and also Te Taumata o Ngāti Whakaue, who most of you will all be aware of. We're separate legal entities, but at times on important issues we do to come together for collective decisions, and this is one of those. Our position's pretty straightforward, and as you would have expected, the Ngāti Whakaue collective entities fully support the Council's proposal to change the reserve classification status from cemetery to community housing, and obviously we also support the return of the whenua to Pukiroa for Ngāti Whakaue as soon as possible. From our perspective, and I think we just wanted to be really clear that what this does for us is basically it enables us to start consideration of the potential for housing on this whenua. What we do know is now that Council have declared the land surplus for its original gifted purpose, that will be returning to us. That's just a question of time. And what we considered in conjunction with Council, that would be a good idea if the reserve status changes, then that gives us the ability to start consideration now on whether land is suitable for housing. And what's important there to note, and again, just reflecting on the prior submitter, everything that was discussed there is something that we would need to be considering in the process. We have in no way committed to doing housing there. What we have said, we've indicated that we would look at, and also look at that, of course, in the context of Rotorua's housing crisis and also our part in the Rotorua Housing Accord with Rotorua Lakes Council, Te Aroha and Ngāti Whakaue. So it's really the start of the investigatory process for us. Some might say that that's not necessary, we can just wait till the land returns. But as we all know, that could take 5 years or more. And without there being certainty around the potential, i.e. the reservation status, we really can't go and talk to anybody, with our plans. So that's essentially our submission. I know I've only got a little bit of time, so I'm happy to open it up for you, Madam Chair, to any question. Just the final thing I would like to add, though, and again, we made this comment in a media statement, this is a very specific and narrow process, as we all here know, in respect of reserve classification status. This has nothing to do with the ultimate return of the land or anything like that. That process has now been triggered, and that will just run its course, and we will get there. And the only reason I note that here is that I just saw in the paper today and hearing from the previous submitter, there was some discussion around views on, well, it might be suitable for cemetery purposes, or if it's returned to whakaua, that there'd be certain conditions put on it. You know, I'm happy to learn new things every day, but that's not part of our gifted reserve lands protocol process with the Crown, nor is it with the Ngāti Whakaua Gifted Reserves protocol with the Crown. So I think it's just important to make that statement that this is quite a narrow hearing and submission. That broader stuff is not part of this. And we would be slightly concerned if other parties were starting to go down that road. So thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora, David. So we do have a couple of minutes left. Councillors, are there any questions for David? No, there don't appear to be any. Thank you very much, David. There don't appear to be any questions from the councillors in relation to your submission, but thank you for taking the time this morning to come in and make the submission in person.
Kia ora, my pleasure. Thank you, everybody. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Kia ora, David.
I think our last submitter has not shown up, so I think we'll just carry on with the agenda, councillors. So we're going to move now to the reports from our two CCOs. The first one up is the Rotorua Regional Airport Limited, their CCO quarterly report. Can I ask for a mover and a seconder that the report be received? Thank you, Councillor Brown, seconded by Her Worship. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you, that is carried. Morning, Nicole, and a very warm welcome to you, Grant. Grant Lilly is the chair of our airport board, and Grant is literally flying in and flying out to make this presentation. So thank you for making yourself available to come in and present in person with Nicole. So Nicole, over to the two of you for your presentation.
Kia ora, good morning everybody. Thank you for having us to present today. I'll go through the presentation, which is highlights of the report that's already been submitted, and then Grant and I are available obviously for any questions. So looking at the financial performance, we're looking at FY23 year to date in May here. That was the information that we had available for this report. Our end of year, full year reports have just been finalised at the moment. Everything's had to be revalued, and so that's taken a little bit longer than normal. So looking at year-to-date May, which is fairly indicative of where we'll finish up obviously on the full year, aircraft movements were down 9% on budget. There we go, sorry, wrong one. Mainly due to lower general aviation movements, so commercial movements were actually up. It's the general aviation movements. The general aviation market hasn't fully recovered yet, and obviously there's been a lot of weather events during FY23 that have not been conducive to small aircraft. Passenger numbers were 8% ahead of budget year-to-date May. It's been fairly consistent throughout the year, and we've seen good upside in revenue. It's led to our much higher than forecast net surplus is basically the increased PAX revenue that we've had. That's been driven by both an upside in New Zealand pricing that was reviewed last year, and also the higher passenger numbers. Following on from this, we were able to make a debt repayment of $2 million in FY23, which was in line with the service funding agreement that we've got with Council, and that was obviously very much supported by the surplus we were able to achieve throughout the year. Looking at the non-financial measures, everything is performing on track, and we've had no controllable safety instances or injuries that have been of concern. So we've been asked also to look forward, and I know that to me coming through, Mark Gibb discussed with Council, and it was in the SOI, a variety of strategic projects that were considered by the airport. Just thought it was worth recapping on where we got to with that and where they all are sitting, and then talk to you about the ones that we're progressing with and where they are in their stage. So there's 5 up there on the plan. The General Aviation Hangar Precinct is still in the feasibility stage. Unfortunately, this is taking a lot longer than we expected. A couple of things. The main thing that's slowing that down is ground soil assessment. Because we're an airport, we are a hail site, and we need to be very thorough to make sure we're doing that properly. So that's taking a little bit longer than expected. Also, interest rates are not conducive to building hangars at the moment and getting a high return. So while we're continuing this ticking along, it's not the highest priority on the agenda as well. Two projects were reviewed but aren't being progressed. One is the Ground Aviation Services Training Facility or the Fire Training Facility. So we are doing things in this space, but just for our internal staff. We're not looking at making that a sort of a commercial facility. We don't think that that's going to be viable at this stage, and sort of could distract a little bit from core business as well. Private jet fixed-based operations, obviously COVID's made that a little bit more difficult in finding a suitable tenant. What we are doing, however, though, is obviously progressing the airport business park. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. And it will enable us, should somebody with a fixed base of operations come along, it means that we will have the ability to house them. So rather than it being a separate individual project, we're looking at the wider thing and how we can get the airport ready for any opportunities that become available. Heliport and rotary aircraft maintenance facilities, that's in a similar situation. So there will be changes made to that, or are being changes within the airport business park. Obviously that's still all in early stages at the moment, but that will get rolled in rather than looking at individually. We've obviously, as you know, remaster planned the airport, and we're looking at it all together as a holistic approach. An enhanced terminal services offering. So this is sort of was on the SOI's retail and activation space. We're still in the exploration stage of this at the moment. We have engaged a consultant from Auckland that is helping us with this. They're very pragmatic, which is great, what you like to see. We don't want to do anything on big budgets. And we're working through the options at the moment. So we are looking at it from a whole customer experience point of view, right from the front gate right through, and the different areas that we could enhance the airport, not focusing just on like your traditional retail, but what else we can do to deliver and enhance the airport area, and also attracting people coming out to the airport that aren't just there to fly, so we can get more traffic through the airport. That helps increase the revenue through the retail offerings that we do already have at the airport space. So that's so watch the space. There's nothing to announce at this stage, but we are looking through it and working through it. They were the ones that were in the previously announced with or discussed with council a couple of years ago. Obviously what we're working on now, the main one we're working on that you're all aware of and we've discussed before, is the airport business park. That's still in, we've sort of gone through the initial feasibility, as you're aware, and it was worth progressing. So we're looking at taking that to business case stage next. So we're currently looking at some of the high level cost items, things like stormwater will obviously have a big impact on what we do. Yep, no, oh, there we go. So stormwater, soil assessments, geotech and market demand, and that's the areas that we're looking at the business park. We're doing this quite closely also in conjunction with JP's team, where appropriate, and using council expertise, and we're hoping to be able to get that to a business case stage that will go through the obviously airport board first and then come to council if appropriate. Operational focus areas for FY24, so it's just a quick business update. Business continuity and disaster recovery. There's been a lot of learnings, not surprisingly, from airports in the Hawke's Bay. So we've taken those and we've had a fresh look at our own situation out at the airport and seeing what we need to do there. Our Part 139 certification is up in February, working on that. Every 4 to 5 years we need to do an OLS, obstacle limitation survey, make sure there are no trees protruding through it. So that's about to kick underway as well. And we've also started our sustainability journey with a company called InStep, and are in the process of understanding our carbon footprint, and that will lead us to Level 1 Airport Carbon Accreditation, which is a worldwide airport sustainability measure and tool. Couple of other things that we should talk about. Starting to work more and more with Andrew and his team on how we can work together in the tourism space and how we can support them and they can support us. And with the airport being the sort of main point of contact through to Air New Zealand and getting all the messaging right. Also had good discussions and meetings with Air New Zealand to make sure we can grow the markets where possible and see what we and Andrew's team can do to support them. So there's been a lot of work in that space and we will continue to do as much as we can. Right, do you have anything to add before we go to questions?
No.
Just press the, yep.
No, but nice to be with you and happy to be available for any questions that you have.
Thank you, Nicole, for your report. So, councillors, questions for the airport. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, thank you for your report. Just on the question of the business case, how long will that be before that is ready to present to us?
For the business park? It's a really good question. I've purposely not put any timeframes on it. There are a couple of really big pieces of work. The stormwater piece of work and the soil assessment are really quite big pieces of work, and in the past they've taken longer than what we think. We're hoping to we'll have those completed this year, and then it will depend on what the outcomes of they are, and if it varies greatly from our initial feasibility. If it changes the initial feasibility a lot, well, then we'll have to relook at how we would deliver the business park. So it will depend on the outcome of those as to how long the actual business case itself will take.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillors? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Nicole, for your report. As you'll know, we had an annual plan recently, and one of the submitters put an interesting little suggestion in there. I just wanted to bounce it off you, and see what you thought. Can you refresh my memory? How much shares does the council own in the CCO?
100%.
Yes, thought so. Would there be any merit in the council selling some of those shares to a company that specialises in airport management?
Councillor Lee, I don't think that's an appropriate question for our CCO or our board chair to be answering. That's a council matter. Are there any other questions that you have?
Sure. The airport carbon accreditation, what would be the benefit of achieving that?
Yeah, we're working through it in quite a pragmatic approach. So we want to understand our footprint so we can see where we can be more responsible environmentally. It's one of our 5 key priorities to be environmentally conscious. And so the level 1 is basically understanding our carbon footprint. And we will decide from then how and if we progress further through the ACA scheme. But first and foremost, it's about being pragmatic and making responsible choices for the environment and for the airport.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the Chair. Thank you, Nicole, for your report. Morena Grant. Could I just ask, in your report there's a couple of references to high interest rates at the moment maybe affecting future plans. But could I put it to you that up until, say, the middle of last year, we've had record low interest rates for the better part of a decade. Are we doing a disservice to the public of Rotorua as the guardians of their assets that we're not further along with our plans? Because it seems to me that we've, someone could say we've sort of missed a trick here, not having our business park plans or having other utilisation plans to try and recognise the value of this asset. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think the key reflection I'd pose there is just that, you know, we've gone through, of course, 2.5 years of significant COVID impact, and so for long periods of time there, we had no one moving at the airport during lockdown, shutdown periods, etc. No revenue at all coming in. So the airport's, you know, gone through some challenging financial times in the last 2-3 years. We've bounced back from those as reflected in these results now, you know, quite nicely, quite quickly. which is encouraging. And so we're just getting back to the stage where, you know, we can look more seriously again at financial capability going forward. But I just emphasise that, you know, the COVID impact on our balance sheet and financial performance has been not insignificant. Fortunately, we've weathered that, you know, in the company on our own. We haven't had to look for shareholder support, which is great. And it's great that we are now getting back to a position where we can sort of start to expect to deliver a level of financial performance that will enable us to consider further investment in the business, both the Aero facility, and of course we're an infrastructure asset, and so there's always this need for reasonably significant investment in both maintaining and developing our core assets, and do some of the other strategic development projects that we're looking at. So we haven't missed a trick, I don't think. Yes, the reality is interest rates have jumped up very sharply in the last 12 months, and all businesses are coping with that. And unfortunately, the forecasts now seem to be that higher interest rates, you know, will be with us a bit longer. They're not going to disappear quickly over the next 12 months.
Thank you. I just had a question. It was actually an article that was in the paper the other day, and it was about Air New Zealand. I think it was titled, "Looking for Airports to Juice Up Their New Generation Planes." Is that an opportunity for the airport? They were asking for expressions of interest for, I think, regional airports that were certain distances apart to be able to fly electric planes from point to point and then charge them up. And obviously with our location, is that an opportunity that we possibly could be looking at?
Yeah, so we are considering it. We're working through the expression of interest document that we've got from Air New Zealand. So yeah, Rotorua does have a few advantages, but geographic location being one. Actually got an meeting bright and early tomorrow morning with Andrew and JP to discuss as well from a Rotorua Inc. perspective. So no commitments on anything, but we're looking at the opportunity and seeing if it could work for Rotorua.
Thank you. And just the other question, just about the capacity. Obviously, we did have that pulse survey which came out from the Chamber and Rotorua NZ earlier this year, and it's just really keeping a check on that capacity for flights out of Rotorua, because we had the business community saying that their preference was to fly to Tauranga given the flight times and more flights being available. So is that something that we're sort of keeping an eye on and sort of influencing with Air New Zealand?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a really good meeting. I was in Auckland last Tuesday, met with their commercial team. Quite a cast of thousands of them turned up, which I thought was quite flattering that they would all want to come and talk to Rotorua Airport. So we're seeing Auckland Rotorua is effectively the struggle, and that's mainly because the international market hasn't come back. But Air New Zealand are playing the long game on that and holding tight on their capacity. Christchurch Rotorua, Wellington Rotorua is performing well. Christchurch Rotorua is getting there, but again, it's that international market growth. So that's where, in particular, on that market, is we were sort of working with Andrew and the team to see what we can do. We sort of examined with Air New Zealand the areas of opportunity where we as a region can help support the likes of Auckland Rotorua. And we also discussed with Air New Zealand opportunities for using some of their frequent flyer data to better unpick what's happening with people travelling to Tauranga, all coming back in this way as well, because we do have data that shows that people from Tauranga come over here too. So trying to understand it in both ways. So yep, those conversations are definitely happening.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, councillors, for Nicole and Grant? No, there don't appear to be any. Grant, can I thank you for taking the time out to come here this morning, and wish you a safe flight for your onward journey, and thank you, Nicole, for coming in this morning. Thank you. Councillors will now move on to Rotorua NZ for their CCO quarterly report.
Forgive me, Madam Chair, sorry. Could I just ask, will we be having discussion after the second presentation on what we've heard, or will there be discussion on the reports? Thank you.
Sorry, I thought that's what we were just doing there. So did you have any questions? Was there any other thing for points of clarification? I can take comments now if you wish to make any comments while we've still got Nicole and Grant here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to point out that I would support any moves by our team and the airport to move constructively forward on development plans. The airport, rightly or wrongly, has received significant public investment by this council over, say, 10, 15 years. And as someone who spent a little bit of time over the weekend going over old airport reports, which can be publicly found, there was a lot of repetition of words like underutilisation and moving forward and return to investment. So I hope that we can progress those as quickly as possible. And this is a very valuable asset, which I don't think is being realised to its potential. So I hope that we can move forward in that as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. I'm well aware of the work that the board and JP and his team are doing in conjunction with the airport, and I'm sure that there'll be some further reports in due course as to the progress that's being made. Are there any further? Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as a person who's recently travelled through the airport, I must say that the service I received there upon arrival for catching my flight last Wednesday, I think, or the Wednesday before, was excellent. I felt the service I got in the cafe was excellent. The whole thing ran really smoothly. It was a really positive experience. The plane going down was chocker, absolutely full. Coming back on the Saturday morning, 9 o'clock, so probably the first flight to get to Rotorua on a Saturday, beautiful weather, I would have expected that to have been chocker as well, but it wasn't. It was like half full. So it was quite surprising that where was everybody else? But I gather from your comments that it's the international market that's missing. However, I would have thought there would have been more domestic travel given the accessibility from the folks of Christchurch wanting to explore something different. But I guess that's part of the plan to get our markets up and running again. But yeah, great experience.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. That's a 5-star TripAdvisor review from Councillor Patterson for the Rotorua Airport, though. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a brief comment about electric planes. I, for one, wouldn't be keen to hop on an electric plane. Sometimes weather delays the landing of aircraft, and the prospect of running out of battery in mid-air doesn't sort of sound too thrilling to me. I'd prefer a good carbon-powered aircraft that has a lot more uptime available to it.
I think these were freight planes, so unless you're a parcel, Councillor Lee, I don't think you've got a problem. Thank you. I don't think there are any further comments. We'll now move on. I thank you, Nicole and Grant. I think those are... Thank you. CCO report for Rotorua NZ. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to receive the report for Rotorua NZ? Moved Councillor O'Brien, seconded Councillor Patterson. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, thank you, that's carried. Morning, Andrew and Tim. Welcome to see you in person this time, Tim. Over to you for your presentation.
Kia ora tātou, nau mai haere mai. Lovely to be here this morning. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for the ongoing support you provide us. What I'd like to do just before Andrew deals with the substantive volume of the report is just cover off a few things that we're working on at the moment and sort of look at what we've been doing recently, but also look at where we're heading in the future with our future focus. Also, just want to acknowledge the airport while they're here. Important piece of our infrastructure and vital for the success of our community, but also our industry. So Grant, lovely to see you. Grant and I go way back in the tourism scene, so lovely to see you here, Nicole, as well. We know how important you are to us, so it's absolutely vital. We've been spending the last month or so settling in a new board. We've got 3 new board members, and we've been working through the induction of those board members and getting everybody on the board and the management team, I guess, onto a similar page, so everybody's got the same information. That led to a planning day that we had this on Monday. Thank you to Councillor Kaifong and Councillor Brown for attending. We really appreciated your attendance, and also to JP for being there for the entirety of the day to listen in and contribute to what we were talking about. We're at that stage really of assessing what we're doing and looking at business as usual and what we've got to deliver, obviously, with the SOI and working through that, as well as identifying where we see some important gaps and opportunities and priorities to work on going forward. So that's a real key for us right now. And also aligned to all that is our team capability and the capacity within our team to cope with the workload we've already got, but also the future workload that we may have based on the expectations that may evolve out of the meetings that we've had and the planning that we're doing. We've got many things that we need to do. We're not going to be able to do everything, but one thing is really clear is that our team are vital in terms of delivering to those expectations, and we've put our team under a lot of pressure. They're very, very hard worked, and I wouldn't say, I could easily use the term overworked, but they are working really hard just to deliver what we've been delivering. Just from a tourism industry point of view, Andrew's team has been absolutely vital to a lot of the support and the confidence and the backup they've given to a lot of tourism businesses who really struggled through the last few years. And they've really provided a mentorship type program for us and a place to go to when things were looking pretty bleak. So some of that stuff you don't see, I see as a tourism operator, and I hear it from the tourism industry, and it's absolutely vital work that's gone on to try and keep people confident that there was a future and there was hope and that there was a place that we could actually move to in the end. I think one thing from our planning day, though, that was really clear is that we know we're all in this together. We can't do it on our own, and we know we've got a council that's our major shareholder, and obviously we have to make sure that the objectives of everything are aligned. I think there's some really positive things that are out there at the moment. We're seeing the international markets recover, despite what Grant and Nicole were alluding to. At the moment, things are actually quite tight. The market did dry up, but we did see quite a good bounce back in season one, and there was pent-up demand in the world, and certainly that gives us a lot of confidence going forward. That's not to say there's not challenges still. There are some markets that haven't come back in earnest yet, and one of those is China. Inbound air capacity to New Zealand is building back nicely. It hasn't built back fully yet, but by the start of the next season, we will see that capacity, up and around, probably around 90% of pre-COVID levels. And some of the capacity is coming from great markets, great source markets like the US, Canada. And so we're seeing some good growth there. What we haven't seen yet is the real sound grow back. And I think that's probably what Grant and Nicole were referring to, particularly in some of the Asian markets, which Rotorua was traditionally strong, and we haven't seen some of that grow back yet to the extent that we saw it pre-COVID. Certainly in the Tapuia context, we haven't seen that yet. Operators, after season one, they've been scaling up, getting back into the game, getting their businesses market ready, and making sure that they've re-established themselves soundly. It's what is quite common post-COVID is you're seeing a lot of businesses, including the one I run, focus more on quality of visitation, the type of visitor we're trying to attract, and the yield we're trying to generate off every average visitor. Less of us are speaking about big volumes. So we sense that the market is not going to produce the volumes that it used to, and certainly we're not after those volumes. We're after a quality visitor who can stay in the destination longer, leave more behind, but also contribute to the community as they go. I think in the business confidence context, things are sort of holding or marginally improving. There's obviously huge challenges around inflation, interest rates, and all the things we've canvassed already this morning. They are big challenges for everybody. Everyone knows they're there. The tourism industry post-COVID was a lot of operators were left with a lot of debt. They had to take loans to survive, and they've obviously got to pay those back, and there's higher interest rates attached to that. So there's some real challenges around that. But by and large, business confidence is there, and there's confidence, particularly in the tourism scene, around what the next season is going to look like. There's reasonable, most of us are holding pretty good, if not very strong, forward bookings, and that leads us to conclude that the next season should be pretty good, and the one after that probably is going to look pretty good as well. It's not that there's not opportunities and challenges, we've got plenty of them. At the end of the day, I think this is all about kind of what we need to do as opposed to what our organisation might want to do. There's quite clearly some post-COVID things we have to address. I'm not going to surprise anyone when I say our destination and our sense of place brand has been challenged during COVID, and that's left a little bit of a lingering soreness in the marketplace that we desperately need to work on and continue to correct. It's not going to be a simple thing to do. It's going to be, quite a challenge, but the board planning day the other day identified this as a major challenge going forward. There's a degree of ambivalence towards Rotorua in the marketplace, both domestically and some internationally, that we need to overcome, and that's going to require a focused effort. There are some perception reality issues that we need to address, and unfortunately the CBD and Fenton Street are tied up in the middle of some of that. We've got a destination management plan that we've activated over the last few years. The funding from government is coming to an end for that, but a lot of the things within that plan are still very relevant, so we still want to keep that moving forward, but in the context that we've got to build our markets back as well. So, our labour market's challenged. We've all found that. It's huge. Forestry and farming are having a bit of a hard time with their commodity pricing, and in the events and festivals area, we think there's some real work to be done in that area because it links quite strongly back to that sense of place, brand, destination brand, things that we need to focus on going forward. So for us, it's about thinking strategically. It's about enhancing and dramatically improving our digital capability, which is something we really do need to do to ensure all our communication systems are right up to speed. We need to make sure we protect and enhance our internal capability and capacity, particularly with our staff and resources. And we need to ensure that we're doing our part in making sure the community is confident about itself, its sense of place, and where we're heading to in the future, and how the wider tourism, hospitality and other industries fit into that. So there's a lot we need to be talking to Council about, Councillor Kaifong. There's an awful lot, but there's opportunities there, and we've kind of identified what we think are the focus areas. So with that rather long-winded introduction, but I thought it would be relevant for you to know that this is where our thinking is. I'll hand over to Andrew to take you through how we've been performing over the last quarter. Kia ora.
Thank you, Tim.
Good morning. Sorry, I've got a bit of a tickly throat at the moment. Look, I'll keep this relatively brief, so I've obviously got a chance to answer any questions. In terms of the results, it's obviously the fourth quarter, but we've tried to present the kind of annualised results, so at least you've got a full year that you can kind of look back over. In terms of our non-financial measures, apologies, it's a little bit small to read up on the page, but I'm sure this is in your report. It's in the report. As we've ended up in a position where we've achieved around 5 of those kind of KPIs, and 4 of them have been not achieved or off track. Just wanted to touch quickly on a couple of the off track ones. So, and the not achieved ones. One of the ones there, which was around kind of stakeholder satisfaction with the quality of our data and decision making. I think we hit 74% versus 75%. That's a weighted average on a 5-point scale, so they're a pretty ambitious target, but we are certainly closing in on achieving that. The one at the bottom is probably particularly relevant in terms of the eyesight being financially self-sufficient. So you'll see back in the prior year we had a fairly significant loss at around about sort of $800,000, which obviously was the impact of lockdowns and border closures and so forth. So we've worked really hard to maintain that capability for when visitors have returned. Pleasingly this year we're certainly we've made some big inroads in terms of that operating deficit, but suffice to say that we didn't quite hit some of the targets that we were hoping for, and over the summer period largely some of the weather events and so forth have really impacted us. But all the indicators we've got for the year ahead are looking really positive that we will be meeting that target. Over the page, a couple more here just to touch on. So correspondingly, the domestic expenditure target. I do have the final result now for the June figures. So we came in at around sort of $303 million domestic expenditure for the year to 30 June. Obviously a little bit short of our target, and again, that's really been a symptom in terms of just summer not quite meeting those expectations with the weather events and some other factors that continue to kind of to weigh on our brand and reputation. A little bit more work to do in terms of stakeholder satisfaction. Again, this is something the team's really focused on. We're really trying to make sure that we're outwardly focused and we're considering in terms of the value that we deliver for businesses locally. So that will continue to be a real focus for us over the coming year. Financially, these are hot off the press. I think literally Sunday night we finally got through some initial figures for last year. I should add that we are still going through some end of year adjustments. So we think there's probably another $30,000 or $40,000 kind of adjustments that will impact our year end in a positive sense. So we should finish bang on budget around about sort of 50k surplus for the year. Now, what I want to kind of provide a little bit of context there is that last year we ate into a reasonable chunk of our retained earnings. Our balance sheet was looking pretty skinny as a result. One of the things that we've had to do as we've been building back our eyesights this year is obviously restock them. And so our stock on hand has increased quite substantially. We physically really needed to generate a profit this year to be able to just maintain liquidity from a balance sheet perspective. So it's not we're sitting there kind of going, we've got a whole lot of surplus cash. We've really had to watch every dollar and trim back quite dramatically in some areas to make sure that we've come in on surplus. I thought it was useful just to kind of give you a little bit more detail in terms of the year that was. Obviously, we report on that domestic expenditure at sort of $303 million for the year. Alongside that, we've seen about $110 million worth of international visitor expenditure. I should add this is card data, so this doesn't include things like cash and some of the card systems, or if you've purchased something online. We will see later on in the year, we'll see what they call the regional tourism estimates get restarted. Should give a more accurate figure overall in terms of total visitor expenditure in the Rotorua district. Kind of key markets there, obviously, Auckland, Waikato, Bay of Plenty continue to be really important for us from a domestic standpoint. And obviously, as Tim's kind of alluded to, the United States has been building back really nicely. It's been fantastic, obviously, the last couple of weeks in particular to see a lot of Americans around town, obviously travelling following their team, which unfortunately got knocked out. But certainly that's been a nice sort of welcome boost at this time of year. We were generally a little bit quieter. Guest nights, obviously, we're at sort of 1.47 million guest nights for that kind of prior year, which is obviously, and you can kind of get a bit of a sense in terms of what that looks like in terms of, split across hotels, motels, holiday parks and backpackers, and a bit of a sense, that kind of sits us at around about sort of 54% occupancy across that year. So still plenty of capacity and plenty of room to move in terms of filling a few more beds. What does it really mean in terms of visitors in town? So this is data that kind of pings some cell phones at about midday on every day of the year, and we can get a bit of a sense in terms of the number of average visitors we've got in town. It's sort of hovering around that kind of 12 to 13,000 kind of mark. We know it'll be a little bit, it won't capture everyone who's in town if you're not kind of travelling with a cell phone that's on, but certainly it gives you a pretty good indication in terms of the number of visitors in town at any one time. Busiest day, obviously, 4th of June of this year. So, we had well over 25,000 visitors in town. And quietest day, and I won't take this personally because it happens to be my birthday, was, just under 8,000 visitors last September. So, not sure about that. And then on the last piece there is just really a little bit of a view in terms of propensity to visit. So if we look at New Zealanders and there's a bunch of survey work that goes on, and we've surveyed New Zealanders, there's a 35% propensity to visit Rotorua in the upcoming 12 months, which is obviously really positive. And then really pleasingly, when they've run the similar kind of work with Australians that are planning to visit New Zealand in the next 12 months, 65% of them have shown a propensity to want to visit Rotorua, which again is really pleasing and from an overall result. One of the things we've been trying to do each time is just kind of give you a little bit more of a view about some parts of our business, and this time I thought it was useful just to kind of dive into what some of our marketing work actually looks like. I've kind of picked an example because it's pretty relevant to council as well from in terms of the Waka Forest Loop. This is an example of the type of marketing plan that we're generally operating around quite specific kind of assets, whether that's around things like geothermal, mountain biking more broadly. So you can kind of get a sense in terms of the volume of activity that's kind of going on to drive visitors. In this example, that runs across a full year. You can kind of see some of the target audiences that we're focused on, sinks and dinks. So that's, if you don't know the acronym, single income, no kids, and double income, no kids, families with teenagers and active retirees. And then we're into a whole lot of quite specific kind of mediums to really target those visitors. What does it look like when it all goes well? Obviously, we've had well over 62,000 riders on that forest loop over the last sort of 12 months, which is a fantastic outcome. The good number of visitors in there, so sort of 54% of those users were visitors, and 67% of them actually visited specifically for the forest loop, which really does sort of demonstrate the value of something like this. I think from a council perspective, patting yourselves on the back, there's an incredibly good satisfaction rating in terms of that, the score there, 9.2 is an exceptional score, and the Net Promoter Score is also exceptional. So Net Promoter generally takes the promoters minus the detractors. So to score, generally if you go and look at private business, if you've got a Net Promoter Score sitting above 30, you're doing really well. To have something kind of sitting up at 86.5 is pretty incredible and exceptional. So, well done to certainly the council team and the Rotorua Trails Trust to obviously manage that asset. And I'll leave it there for questions.
Thank you, Andrew and Tim, for those presentations. Questions, Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora kōrua, Tim and Andrew. The question that I have is, Tim, because I value your vast experience in tourism and being back home and that again, I'd love to hear from you how you mentioned it about our brand image and how best we can work on that. I'd love to hear from you how help us, all Rotorua people, promote the best of Rotorua, but when you hear the odd flippant comment like, and I'll use Maori words, ngangara, capital of Aotearoa, what are your thoughts on that one, Tim?
I don't know if my thoughts are necessarily, I take it another way. I look at the marketplace and see where they're reflecting it back to me. So, there's certainly perceptions of that stuff out there in the marketplace, particularly so in the domestic marketplace, and it plays through when you, for a business like Te Puia, we do a fair amount of market research and we pick up that noise and we pick up those feelings. We deal with a lot of travel trade, both domestically and internationally, and certainly we've picked it up within those channels. So that's clearly there. We do, in our view, we have a reputational challenge, and we've certainly got we believe we need to front foot that and make sure that we don't leave that behind. But it requires more than just a tourism response or a hospitality response. It requires a collective Rotorua response. Yes. So that was part of our discussion the other day, is you just can't isolate this and say it's a tourism issue, or I think it's actually a community challenge, and that's the way we've got to look at it, and we see ourselves playing a role helping lead that, but we're not the only answer to it.
Thanks, Tim.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your reports, gents.
Kia ora, Don.
Couple of questions. Going through a description. You were talking about the television partnerships. We already know about the upcoming episode of the Australian travel program, which is looking forward to seeing that come out. But just the other day I was surfing and found Men in Kilts Season 2. Now, for those of you who don't know what that is, that's Sam Hugan and a guy by the name of Graham McTavish, and they're the major stars of Outlander, which is probably one of the top programs in the world at the moment. It's a channel called Stars that showcases that particular series, and it starts on the 11th of August, and episode 2 focuses on Māori culture. And I noticed in the background of the shorts, they were sitting chatting with Makoia Island in the background. So how much did we maximise out of that?
Look, those are exactly the type of opportunities that we're referring to in terms of that. So certainly that was a previous opportunity that we've worked on over the last sort of 12 months, in combination obviously with the other one around the travel guides guys out of Australia. So certainly I do have I think I've got a pre-production copy of the episode, so I'll be able to share that with you at some time. It's without kind of giving it away, they absolutely love their time here in Rotorua. So we know that we've got that's had a really positive kind of impact, I guess, in terms of that core Australian market. And maybe that's part of that. How we're kind of seeing that propensity to kind of view Rotorua as a must do if I'm coming to New Zealand. The 4 that we've mentioned there, look, they're still under wraps at the moment, so they're obviously for another day, and they range from direct kind of support in terms of where someone's looking to come and film an episode, through to some JV campaign activity that we'll be looking to try and leverage a national organisation to buy some TV time that, look, we simply couldn't afford to do on our own. So, those are really critical for us in terms of getting good bang for our buck in terms of where we put our marketing spend. Yeah.
Excellent. And just going back to what you were just saying before, Tim, with regards to the perception of our city, those kind of programs make a huge dent in that perception and improving it. So when we know those are coming up, perhaps we could utilise some of our channels to promote that to our people, to say, watch these, it'll show you what we're really about. Just one other question coming from your comments that I was very interested in about the meeting the other day. You identified festival and events as future opportunities. Would that include sport?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for your reports today. Age-old query time. The average night stay, 2 nights. It's been that way for a very long time. I myself, for relatives who asked what they could do in Rotorua, came up with easily 5 days' worth of activities. Now, I know if you had the magic answer to this, you'd be bottling it and selling it to us. But what's the drivers to try and expand that so we're getting the people doing the full 3 and 4 day a true Rotorua experience? Thank you.
Look, there's no magic answer there, and I guess it's worth commenting that that is an average length of stay length. So you'll get a lot of because we're quite strong in terms of some of those domestic markets, and we get a lot of weekend traffic out of the likes of Auckland and so forth. So they're only going to come and stay 1 night, which obviously does skew some of the average kind of length of stay down. Interestingly, in the last, I've been sort of looking back over the data, and a small shift is actually quite significant. So, historically, we've kind of actually sat around sort of 1.8, 1.9. Over the last 12 months, we're actually kind of sitting up at about 2.1, which is really, that's actually quite a big gain when you kind of stop and really kind of analyse the numbers. Some of the work we've been doing and discussing as a team, is just making sure that, particularly we're getting into this travel trade kind of space and into some of those offshore markets, is we're not just giving them a 2-day itinerary anymore. We're making sure we're actually kind of giving them a 3, 4, 5-day itinerary that's centred around Rotorua. So again, trying to be really proactive in terms of the types of itineraries that are going into those, the wholesalers and the travel agents when they're kind of talking about, you're coming to New Zealand, it's a hell of a long way. Where are you going to spend your 2 weeks? Well, we want to capture as much of that as possible. So that's certainly the focus in terms of that travel trade space at the moment.
Just adding to that, what you'll tend to find is domestic visitors will tend to spend 2+ nights. That's as a general rule. Your internationals are down at sort of 1.8 or slightly lower than that. That's probably one of the metrics we have to look at really closely, because what that's indicating, if that moves, especially downwards, that you're struggling against other regional competition, because in the end, in the international marketplace, for the majority of the international marketplace, you're competing for time. So you can have the best product mix in the world, but if those visitors or the travel sellers don't understand the diversity of product, or you don't have the accommodation available at the right time, or the right accommodation, those things all affect it. And certainly, we have picked up from a number of travel agents post-COVID, the other regions close to us are picking up some of that, that opportunity, and are doing a good job of it. And we need to make sure we don't lose those nights, because time, as a tourism operator, time in destination is the most important thing. And the quality of the experience is obviously really critical, in that. And so that's how I tend to look at it, because if we've got the time, then we can maximise the advantage. Over time, Rotorua has probably gone from over 2 nights, this is over a very long time, gone from over 2 nights from an average international visitor down to about 1.7, 1.8. What's really concerning is when influential travel sellers and media don't include it in the itineraries at all, and they bypass. That's when you've got trouble. And we have seen in this last season, we've got a very, very large tourism attraction just over the hill that's doing extremely well. And what that's tended to do, this is how what appears to be a small thing can be really influential for a destination like Rotorua. What that's led to is a movement of people down State Highway 1 with the new roads into that tourism attraction and then onto Taupo. So Taupo has been getting the benefit of that. As a result, what we've got are day visitors, international day visitors, not staying a night at all. That's coming across for the day, they have 2 inclusions, and then they're gone again. So we never see the advantage of them being in destination for that night. So, the essence, those movements can appear quite subtle, but they're actually significantly influential in terms of the way traffic moves, particularly in the free independent travel market, where people are in camper vans, cars and the like, and they're moving down at their own speed. And that's where I think we see some of the leak. Hope that explains it a bit more.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Wayne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Tim, and both of you for, Tim and Andrew, for the presentation and the explanations there. I guess following on from that conversation, one of the pieces of the puzzle is the accommodation offering. And I've heard through Rotorua NZ and also through some of the travel outbound and inbound operators that obviously the Rotorua's accommodation offering, when compared, we always get compared to Queenstown and that, but Queenstown's offering is of a significant higher quality. And I guess what are we doing, and I know there has been some work done, but what are we doing to attract that higher quality investment, not just the new investment, but I guess also the investment into the current offerings that we have, the hotels and that?
Look, there's a whole lot to unbundle on that, so I'll keep it brief. But from a new investment perspective, look, we continue to try and work with some external investors that are looking to develop new properties. But I would say at the moment, with the rapid increases in cost of construction and interest rates, that's a pretty challenging proposition to try and make the numbers work. So that's a hard one. One of the challenges, if you kind of look back historically, and this is sort of going back pre-COVID, around the particularly the kind of the hotel sector performance. It's really, if you can kind of go and find the data, it's published reasonably frequently in terms of quarterly. Rotorua and Queenstown have actually traditionally had pretty similar kind of occupancy levels. The reality when you kind of look at the key performance metrics around kind of RevPAR and ADR, we've been at kind of half to a third of the Queenstown rates. And it's a bit of a historical kind of, structural issue we've got here in Rotorua, where we've had a large number of motel rooms historically that have actually dragged kind of yields backwards. So if you're a hotel owner here and you've got a property in Queenstown, or you've got a property here in Rotorua, and you're kind of going, well, one's kind of performing at this level, it's making me, double the return. Where are you going to put your money when it comes to the refurbs, and or new investment? And they've generally kind of piled it back into those markets that make them more money. Interestingly, what we've seen post-COVID, and this is one of the the sort of conundrums, is reducing the stock that's available in terms of the motel space has actually kind of been positive. So we have seen a bit of a lift in terms of the ADR and RevPAR, and we're now starting to see actually some of those hotel owners actually reinvest into their properties. So there's at least probably 4 properties around town that have got pretty sizable upgrades. And it's not just limited to the traditional kind of liquor paint and new carpet. They are fully gutting and going after it and actually really looking to do the right thing. So the conundrum for us is how do you affect a structural shift in that market over a sustained period of time that lifts the kind of return for those operators. So not just reinvestment, but new investment looks attractive as well.
I'd just add to that, a strong destination doesn't require just one type of accommodation. Some people just default to hotels, and that's right. You need good quality hotels, and you need good quality accommodation, coming into the market at that level. We're probably missing in Rotorua for some time now is at that 5-starry level. That's kind of where we've missed the boat. But other activities that are going, like investment in, say, holiday parks and things, are not irrelevant in the scheme of it, because a lot of quite high-value visitors who are tending to stay a little bit longer actually might stay in those locations, but are spending quite strongly in their activities and other attractions that they're doing, going out for dinner and the like. So it's usually a bit of mix. But I'll just endorse Andrew's thing. The thing we have seen with hotels here is a result of the reduction in motel stock in the market, it has tended to push the hotel rates up, and that's kind of one of the long-term things we've needed to see, because if that's happening, then we've got more hope for reinvestment and new investment coming off the back of that. And certainly it's a focus for the organisation, working alongside those operators that do see an opportunity to develop, those new forms of accommodation, but also, upgrade what's already there.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson, did you have another question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I missed this one before. Now, commercial sensitivity, don't be specific, but on page 19, it says you supported a Te Arawa entity to investigate development opportunities in Nongataha. So what is that? Is that a tourism opportunity or an industrial development?
I'm just trying to think which one that was. A tourism opportunity.
Exciting. Cool. Thank you.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for your report. I'm interested in the same issue that Councillor Patterson has just referred to. So your key performance measures for 2023, the first one is the number of Te Arawa economic development projects directly supported by Rotorua NZ, and you have a target of greater than or equal to 3. You've achieved 4. Is this a discriminatory key performance measure?
Councillor Lee, I don't think that's an
Point of order, Madam
question.
Chair.
Yes, thank you. Would you like to rephrase the question?
Madam Chair, the freedom from discrimination is Section 19 of the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act.
I don't think that's an appropriate question for our presenters to answer. So, do you have another question?
How is that not appropriate? Sure, I have another question. Do you have a key performance measure for non-Te Arawa economic development projects?
I would have thought most of our key performance indicators cover the wide breadth of the, the local economy and local economic activity. Yeah, absolutely.
This one's specific.
Yeah, absolutely. They cover a wide gambit. So, it's the local economy generally, that's for sure.
Thank you. Are there any further questions?
Yes, ma'am. Can you tell us how many non-Te Arawa economic development projects that have been
Councillor Lee, I think we've had an answer from around that. Do you have another question? A different line of questioning?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair. Gentlemen, could I just ask, given in your report we state that we support various film and television opportunities as they arise, do we have a specific fund set aside, or is your support more in lines of help trying to find locations, accommodation for large groups, film crews, etc.? Thank you.
Yep, good question. Through the Chair. No, we have no specific fund that's allocated to that. I'd probably note regionally there's probably only a couple of regions that really do provide cash support. Our support is really limited to, exactly as you've kind of alluded to, it could be helping with location scouting through to, trying to facilitate arrangements between kind of accommodation providers and crews, through to us thinking about kind of, well, how do we leverage that activity from a marketing perspective at the tail end? Yep.
From an operator point of view, Te Puia is obviously a place that a lot of film crews want to come, and Andrew's team is constantly coordinating with us in relation to that, and making sure a member of his team will host that film crew. They'll be on site with that film crew, providing a Rotorua context to it the majority of the time. So it works really well, it flows through, and then our team obviously picks it up from there.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for your indulgence. Councillor O'Brien's questions actually prompted another train of thought for me. So we're coming up, as you know, to our LTP, and this is an issue that I believe this is my personal opinion. I have yet to canvass my fellow councillors about it, that perhaps this should be something this council should consider as a fund to help our film industry and grow the opportunities for attracting investment in Rotorua. Would you see that as a good idea?
Look, we have worked alongside the local film community probably for the last couple of years. They had a proposal to establish a soundstage and facility here. I know that they continue to do that, and obviously our view is that there's some other funders that are available to support that. We're pretty comfortable that we're playing in the right space, and look, arguably you could look at the arrangements that Christchurch have put in place, where they have put a screen grant fund in. I think you'd want to be really careful in terms of just considering how the national arrangements work around that as well. So, for example, there's pretty generous kind of screen grants for overseas productions and so forth that are already in place. Again, on the one hand, I think it's worth underlining just how valuable that activity is to the local community. They purchase a lot of local goods and services, but on the other hand, you do need to weigh that up comparatively with all of the other opportunities that do present themselves.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Waru.
Yes, kia ora tātou. Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation, guys. Andrew, Tim. Just wanted to ask around the importance of events. Has there been any more thoughts, in your recent hui and everything like that around where we could have events? I know we've talked about accommodation and visitors coming to visit our attractions and things like that, but I just thought it'd be nice to hear from you around your thoughts around events, holding events in Rotorua.
I think we canvassed it the other day at our planning day and highlighted the importance of events. We're also well aware of the review that's continued to go on around events, and we certainly want to be having more discussion with council around how that looks going forward and what role we play in that and how we maximise that. As I said in my presentation, events are a really key part of building confidence in a community and making statements about the community, and also the massive economic drivers when you get them right. And certainly we see ourselves playing a role in there, but we need to have some more discussion with council around what that looks like going forward from our perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess just through what I was really saying, I did hear those parts. I was just trying to ascertain as to what kind of events do you think we could attract here with the current infrastructure and things in place that we have now. That's all.
There's a wide range of events and business events, for that matter, that we can attract with the facilities and resources we have. I think we've got some opportunities to really capture some really strong advantages around things in our calendar like Matariki and some of the long weekends where we can place even stronger events and relating to our mountain biking and our outdoor lifestyle here. So I think there's some really sound things that we can do. But I'd suggest we want to do, maybe 4 or 5 things really well rather than, a whole bunch of things that are done, or underdone and not really having the result we want. So that's the discussion we really need to focus in on and make sure we get that right.
I totally agree. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Tim, also congratulations to Andrew and your team as well about meetings 2024 for Rotorua. And maybe is there an opportunity there when we've got all of these domestic buyers here in Rotorua to be shoring up our brand and bringing them to our destination?
Actually, to be honest, this week we've got 250 people from the tourism industry in town for the Tourism Exporters Council conference, and a lot of the key travel buyers are there who worship's opening it this afternoon and opening the conference this afternoon. Those sorts of events are major. We've had large numbers of travel influencers coming through Te Puia and other operators over the last few days. So those things do make a difference and are really, really important to the destination, as are things like Trends, which is the big tourism show every year. They're really critical for making statements and positioning the destination where it needs to be.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation this morning. I think we've had quite a lot of questions, so thank you very much, gentlemen, and we will move on, councillors, to...
Thank you, everybody.
I think we'll just take one more item and then we'll take the morning break. We've got the proposal around the retention of the council land at 8 Toki Place. Can I ask for a mover and a seconder that the report be received? Thank you, Councillor O'Brien and Your Worship. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, thank you. Aye. That's carried. Morning, JP and Steph. You're going to overview your report and presentation.
Morning, everyone. Just while the presentation that Steph is just going to guide you through comes up. Just broadly, obviously this was an area of land originally acquired for sports fields. A number of years ago, when we were at the height of our housing pressures, there was a decision made that the greatest need was to consider the pipe round around social housing. So Council had a resolution to enter into an agreement with Kāinga Ora for the sale and development of this site for housing. From the report, and Steph will go through it in a bit more detail, it has been a protracted process, and I would say that because of the development requirements, they've failed to meet our conditions, which was to consider around valuation. So again, reflecting the pressures we have on sports fields and knowing now that Kāinga Ora has a pipeline of housing that appears to be sufficient for our community, our greatest need is actually back around to that sports field need. So Steph will just guide you through that, and we're just looking to confirm that new direction.
Morena. JP's actually covered some of what I wanted to say, as usual. Can I have thank you. Sorry. So this land obviously is on Te Toki Place. It adjoins the existing Rayboard Park Sports Park, purchased in 2000 for around $152,000 from the Crown at the time. and we haven't used it really for anything since that time, with the exception of loading fill from other developments around the sports complex. In 2019, Council made a decision to sell it to Kāinga Ora for housing, and since that time, Kāinga Ora have been trying to progress development, undertaking due diligence, etc., and have come up against a number of constraints, which is making the development somewhat unfeasible, particularly around earthwork requirements, potential flood risk, and liquefaction. So in some parts, the development would need to be lifted to approximately 2 metres. A land valuation was sought, which came back with a value around $2 million, and Kāinga Ora essentially not prepared to pay this given the high development costs for this land. So we're now kind of in this position where they don't want to pay what we've offered, and therefore can't meet the conditions of sale that was agreed to by the previous council. In the meantime, Council's undertaken further work to identify the capacity of our existing sports field network. At this time, it's identified that we need approximately 29 hours of additional sports field time, which equates to about 3 full-size equivalent fields. We've had some initial work done to identify whether this space could provide for additional fields, and we could potentially fit 2 full size fields in this that would need to be sand carpets just because of the proximity to the stream. So we are now at a place where we're recommending that we retain the land on the basis that it can't easily be developed. Council wouldn't get the financial return it originally set out to achieve, and we need the additional sports field requirements. There is some further work that would need to be done just to confirm that the sports fields can go there, and work with existing sports field codes to determine the most optimal field layout for this site, but also the balance of Rayboard Park as well. So, and then we would bring that full costing back to you through LTP. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report, team. I'm a little confused about this particular process. My understanding was 2019, the decision to sell Titoki Place was actually to generate funds to support the Westbrook Sports and Recreation Precinct, and that is still on the table in the LTP. So wouldn't we remove that first from the LTP before we decide to change what we were doing with this?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, that's not correct. This was not in any way intended to fund the Westbrook development proposal. This was entirely separate as a piece of land that we'd acquired for sports field development, and consequentially, there was a view that we would be addressing the sports fields through other means, through the LTP, but this one was seen as an opportunity to actually support housing outcomes at that time when we had the most pronounced part of our housing crisis, and Kāinga Ora did not have a pipeline.
Right, okay, I'll take your word on that. Page 26, initial discussions are also underway with clubs to identify opportunities to partner and ensure the delivery of sporting facilities that best meet the needs of the community. So did you include in your decisions about the 2 fields here, did you have a look at the plan submitted by Lakes FC regarding Puaringa Park?
Yes, I am aware of that submission, and the discussions that I'm referring to are specifically with Lakes FC, but there will also need to be conversations with existing users of Rayboard Park. What I would say is that the 2 additional fields, if that's the route that Council proceeded to go down, won't fulfil the needs of Lakes FC in its entirety. So while there's conversations going on with clubs, we also need to be more aware of the code requirements. There are a number of clubs that sit within each code. So.
Supplementary. And just carrying on from that, with the future development strategy that we've been through, we identified a hub need for Nongataha as well, which of course they're connected with too. So does this fit into that mix?
So I guess the long-term view that's been determined from the sports field demand and supply analysis is that by 2030, sorry, I'll just confirm my exact numbers, we will need an additional 93 hours of sports field time, so that's about 9 fields equivalent. So this is addressing the need or the capacity requirements that we have now, but won't service the future, so that will need to be a further conversation, and that is how the FDS has tried to pick that up.
And just one quick one. One of the presentations that I attended last year, I think it was Housing for the Future at the library, and they were broken up into different sections. The one I believe I attended, which Stavros and yourself, JP, were there, I tried to find the video, but for some reason the questions and comments were cut off. It's just the video. In that particular presentation, I recall it showed stormwater retention ponds or dams on Titoki Place. And I asked the question, they used to be on Springfield Golf Course, now they're gone and they're on Titoki Place. And the answer that I got was that's because we haven't decided where they're going to go yet. So is Titoki Place still potential for stormwater detention dams?
I went back through with Stavros. One of the things that the Kāinga Ora work, and we're hoping to get some of the geotech work that they've undertaken themselves on the site, is just to look at the limitations of the site. That it's not a great site, and hence the significant cost implications that Kāinga Ora were facing if they were to develop it. So Stavros's comment to me has been, look, to identify that site is probably not sufficient size and geotech wise, and so we still have to go through the work that he's proposing on a whole bunch of feasibility on sites, is to keep this one in the mix. But his initial view is size is not sufficient, and geotech is probably a risk that it will not be feasible at all. However, and I think the however is important here, all of our green spaces, and one of the things I think Stavros and I have been highlighting through is that we have green spaces down through the Ituhina and the Maungakakihi, and when it comes to managing flood events, so if you can't manage it through the retention through our dams and you still have major events, it is better to flood and use our green spaces than to flood homes and businesses. And also then it also improves the potential for the damage that then happens in water quality as well. So I still think this is a really feasible site to be considered within the wider stormwater solutions for the Utahina catchment. Whether it's used as a sports field, it's not incompatible. It may not be appropriate for a detention pond, but it's certainly potentially part of the wider solution for stormwater management through the Utahina.
Thank you.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Patterson's line of questioning was heading in my direction as well. I do recall from the Westbrook Sports Precinct Master Plan that the Titoki land was scheduled or posited as a funding source, and as was the sale of half of Neil Hunt Park, as I recall. The current Neil Hunt Park is occupied by a football club with just about, one or two teams. So I'll just flag that as I presume if the Lakes Football Club were to occupy those club rooms, then that would go some way to alleviating their requirements. Those fields are currently underutilised at the moment, I understand.
I think the response to your question is that overall we do have a deficit. There is definitely some code allocation optimisation that needs to happen across the network. That is sometimes challenging just due to club legacy use issues. With respect to Neil Hunt Park specifically, the club rooms themselves are owned by Rotorua United, which has changed its name to something else, but so council doesn't have any control around who can use them. The other issue we face is that a lot of the existing sports field lighting is owned by the clubs, so council can't control who uses them, and given that we're talking about winter sports code who need floodlights, while we can book fields for clubs, we can't necessarily guarantee that they are able to use the floodlights. But we are going through a process to try and take over ownership of the floodlights, that we have more control over our fields.
Floodlights are a wee bit of a side issue. Neil Hunt Park is owned by the council, is it not? And it's leased to what used to be Rotorua United.
So the club rooms specifically, the building, that is owned by the club.
I think we've got a discussion about Totoki Place here. I'm just wondering what...
Yes, well, I am interested in sports fields use, and of course the Springfield Golf Club is a sports field. In fact, golf is a Olympic sport. And
sorry, we're talking about this proposal here. So
yes, we are, Madam Chair, and there seems to be some difficulty in progressing the renewal of the lease of the Springfield Golf Club on the grounds.
Point of order, irrelevance.
It's not at all irrelevant, Councillor Wang, because we're talking, as Councillor Patterson did, about stormwater.
Councillor Lee.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Could we just pause for a minute? We are talking about the Totoki Place discussion here. We're not talking about Springfield Golf Course or any other football clubs or any other grounds or lights. We are talking about this proposal here. So do you have a question that relates to the proposal or the presentation that's just been made?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Could you please ask the question that is relevant to this discussion?
Madam Chair, the issue is that your staff report has focused upon using this land, which, by the way, Darren Toy told me is worth about $1 because of all of its geotech issues. That's the regional director of Kaingaora. The issue of the use of Totoki as a detention pond is something that Councillor Patterson raised, and something I'm very interested in, because it's the detention pond issue that is holding up the lease of the Springfield Golf Club, and so the use of the land of the Totoki for that purpose is highly relevant. So I would like, is it possible that we can get a full report prepared that considers the alternate options of using that area as a detention pond, so that the whole burden is not placed upon the Springfield Golf Club?
Councillor, I had reached out, and it's disappointing Mr. Michael wasn't here today, because he could probably provide some additional information. My understanding from the email he gave me was that the capacity for the site was too small for a detention pond. He did ask whether there was any information, because he believed it would probably be questionable, its geotech, and I think your comment from the regional manager from Kaingaora probably goes to information that he also knows about the ground conditions. So I don't believe that it's a feasible site at this stage. We can certainly seek that information and that confirmation for you, and just close off that discussion around the feasibility of the site for a detention. I don't, as I say, from what I've received preliminary-wise, and we can probably very quickly clear that issue, is it feasible as a detention area? So we can do that quickly, but as I say, I think it's got a potential to contribute to a wider catchment solution, and that is not incompatible with sports fields at the same time. So I think the answer is we can get you the answer. From the preliminary discussions I've had with our chief engineer, he believes it's highly unlikely that it is feasible.
Can we have that in the form of a peer reviewable report?
I don't think it's appropriate for JP to answer that question. Jeff, I don't know if you want to make any further comment.
Yes, if I may, through the chair, the Infrastructure Division is actually undertaking a significant study into both the requirements for stormwater management and the different options that will actually be put forward for that management, and that will be something that will be actually timetabled to come back to council and at a future state. So I think it is fair to say that the Tatoki place will actually be considered, as JP has indicated, as part of that actually broader study. JP at the same time has provided you with some preliminary advice as to what the Infrastructure Division sees with regard to Tatoki Place. So in other words, I think that it is, the preliminary view is that it's not going to be the solution for everything. It is actually going to be part of a broader solution that will actually be needed going forwards. The question is actually sports field development incompatible with also the ability for flood reticulation? And the answer that we've got back is no, it's not. There is nothing incompatible about having sports fields on this land and also being able to use it as part of a broader reticulation solution for stormwater through into the future.
Madam Chair, and probably the reason why the conversation is pivoted on sports fields is again highlighted in that report. So there is that shortage in capacity, the 29 hours. And so just talking with Steph beside me, generally one field is equivalent to about 10 hours of use. So this is 2/3 of our current deficit, which would be addressed. I think the conversation that's been raised here about optimisation of other fields give us another opportunity. So that deficit in capacity obviously was what prompted a number of submissions to the annual plan process.
Councillor Maxwell.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. I can recall when we bought this many years ago for $150,000, and there's a possibility of us, did you say we may be able to up to 2 million that we could get if we got a good investor in buying it, possibly for housing or something else?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the Kāinga Ora and Council jointly procured a valuation for the land that came back with a value around $2 million for the bare land. But what's come about through the due diligence is that the land development constraints for residential make that value reasonably unfeasible. So I don't think we would get that value back from any willing developer. Does that answer your question, Councillor Maxwell?
Yeah, and it just says, because the dilemma I got is looking at it, gosh, it doesn't look suitable even for a couple of playing fields to be used. And if housing became a better option, what would we have to do? Do we have to lift it up further because of... And I think this would be for you, JP, because, I mean, we know we've got a housing deficit crisis, and you're more aware of it. Is there still a possibility it could be a good housing project?
Through you, Madam Chair, I believe the answer is no. The risks are significant on the development of that site, and that's what's been reflected back to us by Kāinga Ora, and Councillor Lee's comment about the extremity of that risk has led to Kāinga Ora actually saying it's a tough call. So they have done a significant amount of work recognising the ground conditions, the flood risk, and therefore the amount of fill that would be required to lift the site, They've done a whole bunch of work about, obviously, then the flooding displacement that gets created by that circumstances, and then that ability to get a appropriate housing yield. So if Kāinga Ora have done that kind of due diligence work and they see it as extremely high risk, I think its market value is therefore highly questionable in its current location. So considering what we paid for it originally and its potential to address one of our issues currently, that's probably why we've come back to you here today to suggest turning it into those fields to address that capacity and to contribute to our wider stormwater solutions is probably the highest and best use.
Thank you, councillors. I'm just looking at the time. I have one question from Councillor Waru.
Madam Chair, to catch by, my question was already answered just then by JP. Thank you.
I'm going to just finish questions and I think we'll take the morning break. So are there any last questions? Otherwise, I'm going to take the morning break. Councillor Patterson.
Just a very quick question. This all relates to the PARS plan. When are we going to see that?
I believe that is coming to you in a workshop in the middle of September.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, councillors. I think we'll take the morning tea break, perhaps if we reconvene at 11:30. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
We'll restart the meeting now. So we've finished all the questions in relation to the earlier session. So I am now going to ask for a mover and a seconder.
Point of order.
Councillor, what's your...
May I move an amendment to item 4 on the recommendations?
I haven't got a motion on the table yet, so I think I had... Councillor O'Brien had indicated that he was moving that.
I thought that's what happened last week with the museum. Am I mistaken?
Sorry, I've got a mover and a second foot now. Councillor Brown's just... So it's been moved by Councillor O'Brien, it's been seconded by Councillor Brown. You have an amendment to that, do you?
Yes, ma'am. I would like an amendment to item 4 on the recommendations so that it's the land is considered not just for sports fields, but also for detention pond and general stormwater use.
Is there a seconder for that amendment? Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I'm just wondering, hang on, I'll just get some wording then. So the... So I'm just going to see if that the committee directs staff to undertake work to understand the implications and full cost of developing the land for sports fields and/or stormwater mitigations for the Utina catchment. Is that
not quite? Stormwater mitigations were signalled by JP, but I'm interested also in a more formal addressing of the use of the area for detention ponds specifically.
is a stormwater mitigation a detention pond? I think we're
It
probably
may
splitting
be.
semantics here. I think that...
It may be, but it may not be. It's
Well, I think if we're talking stormwater mitigations, which could include all sorts of different opportunities for stormwater mitigation, which may include a detention pond, I think, and that will be a direction for staff to look at the alternate uses of the land, which is both sports fields and or stormwater mitigation.
all bananas are fruit, but not all fruit are bananas. I'm moving a specific reference to detention ponds because I'd like that specifically addressed in the forthcoming report.
So it's going to be and or stormwater ponds.
For full cost of developing the land for sports field, detention pond and stormwater use. Covers the whole gambit.
So I think it needs I think we need an S after ponds.
Mm-hmm. Happy? I think it's singular, isn't it? Wouldn't be two.
Are you happy with that now? Councillor Lee, you've moved in. Councillor Patterson, you've seconded that as the amendment, so we'll take that amendment first. Does that make sense? Hang on. That the council directs staff to undertake work to understand the implications and full cost of developing the land for sports fields and or detention ponds with an S / or should it be and stormwater
How
detention?
about, if you want to put a plural in, you could put it in brackets, because I would imagine there'd only be one detention pond, but if
Okay,
there's
so
two,
it's
well,
a
that's fine.
detention pond. Okay, pond. Maybe it's and stormwater mitigations. Sorry, can we take the comma out and change that to and or stormwater mitigations? I think that probably makes
Yep, that's fine.
/ or. Right, thank you. So it's now been moved and seconded with that amendment. We'll just take clause 4 only at this stage. Your Worship?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, just want to double check. I always get mindful when councillors are recommending a solution that we have not had presented to us or potentially investigated by staff. So just want confirmation on whether that is the correct wording, like detention pond. As an example, that could signal to the community or the residents around that area for the very first time that there could potentially be a detention pond. However, obviously there have not been any intentions or investigations for that there, as far as I'm aware. I'm very happy to support it being open. I think Councillor Lee makes it very obvious his actual intentions behind this. However, just want confirmation from staff that this is okay as it is worded.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. I don't. We haven't got Stavros here. I don't know. Probably Jeff. Do you want to comment?
Sorry, Madam Chair, just before you hand over to Jeff, is it possible to get the amendment put up on the screen?
Oh, yes, sorry, we'll share that screen
Access
with
to
you.
that. Thank you.
Gomati, can you...
Thank you.
If I may, through the chair, I think the advice that JP has already relayed to the council, that the infrastructure division is actually going to be undertaking a full assessment of all stormwater mitigations, including detention ponds, for this entire area. The wording of this is that effectively a detention pond is actually a stormwater mitigation. So the word detention pond, I think, technically is unnecessary within this particular resolution. The intent, I understand, of this is for, as the work has actually been done looking at sports field development, there is due consideration given to the suitability of the land for stormwater mitigation purposes also. That's the intent of the resolution, and that intent is appropriate, I would say, from a staff perspective. Whether or not it is necessary to flag that you are looking at specifically using it as a detention pond, that's something that the council can look at, but as I've already stated, a detention pond is a stormwater mitigation.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien, you had a question?
Madam Chair, I'm just wondering, as the resolution reads, if sports fields is first, if they both come back, would one have a priority over the other? Is sports fields first? Yeah, I won't be supporting the amendment. Sorry, I take it as is. Thank you.
Thank you. So are there any further comments anyone wants to make in relation to this amendment? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Basically, my thoughts around this were just to make it clear. JP rightly pointed out that this will be part of their planning and that factoring in use of playing fields for stormwater mitigation is part of the overall strategy, wherever it may be. I can understand the need for clarity just to make sure that that is included as part of the investigation, so that a detention pond is looked at and that other stormwater mitigations are considered. By putting it in black and white, for those who look at these minutes going forward, it shows to the people our intent that yes, we are going to look at this, that it's not just a general comment about stormwater mitigations, because not everybody is up to date with what that actually means.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So by way of broader context, Council has proposed building a detention pond around about 700 metres away from the Tatoki land, and we have this land which is adjacent to the Yirahina stream, which is essentially valueless, and currently the renewal of the lease of the Springfield Golf Club is, as I understand it, being held up by consideration of how best to utilise the golf course for water detention purposes. So it would be obvious oversight, and I'm surprised it's not in the staff report actually, it would be an obvious oversight not to give full consideration to whether this land could be utilised as an alternative to the Springfield Golf Course for detention pond purposes. And so I think it's important to have a specific staff directive that they consider that particular issue carefully, as well as other water mitigation options. It's not like detention pond is completely out of left field, given that the plan is to put one 700 metres up the road. So yeah, that's the reason that I've requested this amendment, and would appreciate the support of my colleagues.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments, Your Worship?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. Look, I am open to that site being considered for stormwater mitigations, but I want to bring us back to the original recommendations, which is to support the strategic retention of this land. That work can be done in future. What I do feel uncomfortable with is that we are not the experts, we are not the engineers, and we do have investigations, you're correct, 700 metres up the road into what stormwater mitigations should be in place. So at this point in time, I don't feel comfortable enough to support this. However, I would support that work being underway, and I want to note specifically that we as decision makers need to be very careful with the power that we have in setting a direction and asking through directing of staff to undertake work that could either overlap other work, which in this case it does, or actually cause adverse consequences to the community. Now, we saw what happened and how our community reacted in the past when green spaces were proposed to be used for something else, in that case for housing. And so to go out to our community and all the residents that live around Titoki Place, that's quite different to Springfield Golf Course, which you clearly, that's your interest in proposing this, because the Springfield Golf Course, the area that we're discussing, does not have homes directly around it. Titoki Place does. So without going to those nearby residents and saying...
Point of order.
What is your point of order?
Misrepresentation. There's around 100 houses around the perimeter of the Springfield Golf Course, they both have the public have a vested interest in what's going on there, the community, the local community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's not quite, that was not misrepresentation. I advise you to look at a map. Quite clearly, the green space that is around Springfield Golf Course is significantly larger than Titoki Place, but I will carry on. My point was that I would not feel comfortable recommending that a detention pond could go there without having consulted or at least notified the residents nearby, of which their homes are significantly closer to that green space and also to the river. So those are just my reasons for not supporting this. Again, I am open-minded to looking at what the best use of that land is. It could be stormwater mitigation, but I believe that we have some other processes and discussions that need to occur before we direct staff to not only understand implications but start doing full costing of development for a detention pond. That's what the recommendation says as it is, which is why I'm cautioning it. We're not the experts.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell, and followed by Councillor Barker.
Thank you. I think the Worship, the Mayor's covered it well in this instance. We were here this morning discussing whether we had an opportunity for housing, all for, and originally it was bought for sports fields. And neither of those seem to be suitable. And I heard also JP loud and clear say it is not big enough, it's not suitable enough, and I don't want them to distract. And I do hope, you know, in time we'll get to make the decision up. It's Springfield Golf. We'll get to find out all of that, whether we're going to be saving Springfield and saving Ohinemutu as well. I don't want to bring other things into it at the moment, but no, I think this is the right way to go about it. We were dealing with something for the last half hour or so. I won't be supporting a distraction to what we should be
Thanks, Councillor
deciding.
Maxwell. Councillor Barker will be the final comment, because I think we've heard several councillors speak in favour and against.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can understand the direction that Councillors Patterson and Lee are taking with this. Stormwater mitigation is important across our district, and so we need to actually understand that all the green spaces that can and possibly could be used for stormwater mitigation. This being so specific with the wording causes some tensions that the Mayor has alluded to in the community, and it would not be wise to alarm people. I would have been happier if we had stayed with the original wording, which was just speaking about stormwater mitigations, because they seem a natural place to look at going forward for mitigations as the green spaces, including sports fields. I agree with their initial sentiment that we need to investigate the sports fields, and I'm all for that. It would be helpful actually if I could just see the whole motion so that I can just refresh myself about that. But if the wording was less specific and more on a catchment-wide approach to stormwater mitigation, which could include Torquay and other green spaces, I would have been happier. So, yeah, I can't support the wording as it is.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barker. The full recommendation is actually on page 23 of the agenda. Because we've got an amendment here which is in parts, we're just going to take the amendment in relation to item number 4. So that is now with the wording that's at the bottom of the page there around Sportsfield detention pond and stormwater mitigation.
Madam Chair, do I get a right of
You've already
replying
spoken to the matter.
But having moved the amendment, is that not my option to speak last in reply?
You have spoken twice, I think.
Well,
you spoke when you proposed the amendment, and then you spoke just before, I think, Councillor Maxwell.
Then I'll raise it as a point of order of misrepresentation, and specifically addressing Mayor Tapsell's comments that... I
think the point of order was dealt with, and...
this is a separate point of order, Madam Chair.
What's...
The Mayor gave the impression that it was necessary for staff...
I think you've had your opportunity to have your say. I'm going to put this motion now. We've had debate and questions around the amendment, so I'm going to put the amendment now.
Are you not hearing a point of order?
You hadn't got to a point of order, and you mentioned around the Mayor that had been dealt with, so I'm going to put the motion now. So all those in favour of that in relation to the amendment number 4, please raise your hand. Against? Right, that motion is lost. We'll now revert back to the original recommendation, sorry. Motion. I had that now moved by Councillor O'Brien and seconded by Councillor Brown. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor O'Brien?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very briefly, I take on the points raised by my two colleagues, but can I just remind them, having read the background, it's very specific that all we're doing is voting to retain the ownership within the council. that we are changing a previous policy by a previous council. So with all due respect, I'm a little bit puzzled why we've wasted the last 45 minutes on retention, which is basically what you want. So I won't say any more than that, Madam Chair. I'm happy to move the motion and support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown is the seconder. Okay. Any further comments, councillors? No further comment? Okay. We've had that now moved and seconded as a whole. That's parts 2, 3 and 4. All those in favour, please raise their hands. Those against? Thank you. That's now carried. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move to the proposed changes to Te Akamori Rotorua Library Sunday opening hours. Can I ask for a mover and a seconder to receive the report that the proposed changes be received? Moved Councillor Maxwell, seconded Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, thank you. Carried. Morena, Anaru and Julianne, welcome, and you'll speak to your report and presentation.
Morena, Madam Chair, and morena tātou. I'll take the report as read, and you'll see that we have a small presentation for you this morning as well. If I can just take you back to the annual plan deliberations, and thank you for the opportunity from there that you gave to our Chief Executive for us to go back and look at the feasibility of this opportunity. We've now done that, and Julianne and her team have looked at this with great detail, and this morning we just want to go back through what we've found in order to bring that back to you today as the council. So Julianne will speak to the slides, and if you have any questions at the end of that, we'll take those questions then, if that's okay. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Through you, Madam Chair. So as Anaru said, the slides are just providing a little bit of additional context to the report that you've already read. A bit closer? Sure. Okay, so this first slide just gives a bit of a breakdown as to the visitations through Te Akamori. As you can see, we've got just over 270,000 visitations per annum. The highest activity, as you'll see, is on weekdays with 16.2%, followed by Saturday visitations 11.1%, and Sunday visitations being 7.9%. Obviously, the highest activity occurs on weekdays because that's when all of our services are available and when there's the most demand for activities. So that's business activities by students in schools, community organisations and from our community. This is just a snapshot of the services. If you're not already aware, we provide quite a few services at the library, and some annual data there captured with the services that are currently available and when they are available. So as you'll see, the darker colour cells, so the blue and the green, Monday to Friday, all of our services are available. And of course, Te Akamori also houses the Children's Health Hub, which is formally operates from Monday to Friday as well, and their customers are potentially library customers too. Most of the services you'll see there are also available on a Saturday, except for the bottom 2 or 3, which is the library to you delivery services, our in-house and our outreach programs, and our teaching services, and of course the Children's Health Hub doesn't operate on a Saturday. And then on Sunday you'll see that there's less services available. We don't provide our in-house heritage and research support on a Sunday, and we have very few requests to hold special events. Now, the items in blue at the top are in blue because those are services that can be accessed anywhere, anytime. So providing you've got a device and you've got a library card, you can access any of our book collections, our e-learning services, which are available to anyone, and our book return is open 24/7. People can also book books or reserve books if you like. The 3 green cells that you see there that have an asterisk are the services that would be affected if the library was to close on a Sunday. Now, you've seen there was a table in the report relating to the costs and the savings, which was broken down. You may have noted that the cost on average to operate on a Sunday was just over $193,000 per annum, but the projected savings from closing on a Sunday was an estimated $104,000. This is just a little bit more detail for your interest on that, so you can see where those costs and savings are. So the costs on a Sunday are specifically made up from daily costs, which are your staff, utilities, etc., and general operational costs. So the specific costs in the first row there are relevant to the hours that we're open. The only exception is utility costs, which we will incur even if the library is closed, because we need to keep the building operating. The operational costs, however, are required and enable us to offer services irrelevant, I guess, to the hours of operation. These are things like our e-technology, book management systems, digital subscriptions, national memberships and general maintenance. As these costs are required to operate, they will be absorbed across the remaining days of operation should we close on a Sunday. And I've worked out that this will increase, using current numbers, the cost of visitation on the other days of the week by about 27 cents per visitation. The impact by option. So I'm sure you're aware that whether there's a reduction in hours or if the library was to close on a Sunday, there will be some impacts on our community. We could assume that there may be a loss of some existing customers who may not be able to come at another time from their usual time that they visit on a Sunday. Those that can come another time might increase demand on those other times, and of course that adds a bit of pressure to existing staff on those days. There is also a possible minor loss in revenue, which is estimated at less than $2,000 per annum, and of course this would be minimised if those visitors were to come on another day. If we were to close on a Sunday, which is your option one, it means that none of the in-house services are available, and it also means that the library itself is not available as a community connection space. Keeping in mind, of course, that our e-services are available anytime, and you can access the internet from out in Jean Batten Square, so free public Wi-Fi doesn't stop. We also offer a little bit of a click and collect service, so you can reserve a book and you can just pop in and pick that up at your leisure when we're open. If we were to reduce the hours to 3 hours, which we're anticipating would be from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m, while we're making the space available, it does increase the cost of delivery for the number of visitations we're estimating would happen over that time. We also believe that it would be more difficult to staff when we're only opening for 3 hours, with some of our staff signalling they're not quite as willing to come in for 3 hours as they would be should they be working for a full day. And lastly, we've looked at some opportunities. We do anticipate that some of the customers who normally come either later on the day or Sunday, on the Sunday if the hours were to reduce, this would reduce the costs and visitation if they were to come on the other days. It's still likely the cost would be higher to operate than it would be on a Saturday, because we do have very good visitor numbers on a Saturday. The greatest opportunity we see, however, for some of those customers is if we were to close on a Sunday. The reason for that is it would expose those customers coming on those other days to a range of other services that we currently don't provide on a Sunday, and we think that that would strengthen community resilience. It would make more efficient use of staff time, which would improve our levels of service. We could make more efficiency of our community meeting room, which can be accessed outside of operating hours. We could look at using the library for special events on Sundays, and it would, of course, make our existing days of operation more cost efficient. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Julianne, for a comprehensive report. Councillors, any questions for Julianne? Nope, there don't appear to be any. Oh, Councillor Wayne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for the presentation. My question was just around on the table before on the current state. So on a Sunday, what effect would it have on community groups? Like I understand the chess groups and such utilising the space.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. Yes, we do have the Chess Club that currently operates on a Sunday, and from time to time we have other organisations coming in who primarily use the meeting rooms. So as I've said, we've still got the community meeting room which is available and can be accessed without the library itself being open. We've also had a conversation with the chess group and of course there's other options for them to come in and use the library on a Saturday. So we will still be able to accommodate those groups.
Thank you. There don't appear to be any further questions, so can I ask for a mover and a seconder that the committee supports the closure of the library on Sundays, achieving a cost saving of approximately $104,000 per annum? Thank you, Councillor Brown. Seconded by Her Worship. Any discussion, Councillor Brown or Your Worship?
No, I think it's straightforward. Doesn't seem to be a loss of service to the community. I note that a lot of the other similar sized towns don't offer a library on the Sunday, so I'm not sure that we need to, but happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Your Worship.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you, and thank you very much, Julianne. I want to first of all acknowledge you in your new role as Director of Te Ako Māori. It's great to have you leading that place, and of course we are well aware of the great work that you've given to Council over the many years, so we look forward to your future leadership there. Thank you. It was really good to actually hear back from Council staff on this proposal. I know during the annual plan deliberations it was suggested by councillors, but it is good that we're ensuring that we're not causing any adverse impacts by our decisions. And so to fully understand not only the impact to the community, but also the efficiencies that could or could not be made has been really useful in coming to this conclusion. Can I also mention that the library hours have been changed in the past as well. I recall when I first came into council 10 years ago, it was suggested and there was the eventual closure of the library on Sundays too. But alas, it was re-established. And here we are again. So I do want to acknowledge that it has changed in the past, and if this is not working for the community, we can still take that feedback on board and change it and open it again on Sundays. But for now, I'm looking forward to giving our staff a little bit of a break on a Sunday and also having that building and facility available for potentially other uses as well. So yeah, look forward to not only this change, but all of the progress that we can make around that beautiful asset that we have for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Any further comments? Otherwise, I'm going to put the motion. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess following on from the previous two speakers, I won't be supporting this motion. Throughout the annual plan and during the deliberations as well, I made it very clear about my reasoning before for that, and I'll reiterate them, but also just on Councillor Brown's comments before about I guess similar sized towns not having a library service on a Sunday too, and I guess I could potentially question that, but in my view, our community, I would assume our community would expect that our city would have one of the most, I would say, one of the most basic services that a city could provide, which is a library operating on a Sunday. And it isn't just a library, it's a community hub and it's a community gathering space. And, you know, for young and old to get together there and for students to study there. But it is also a safe space for our community, you know, one where they can just get away for the day and something like that. And for me, it's just so important to have this service running in our community on a Sunday where many other places like schools and other facilities aren't open. And because of that, I just cannot be supporting this motion to close the library on a Sunday. Thank you.
Councillor Wang. Councillor Wari? Did you have your hand up, Councillor Wari?
Yes, thank you. Get through you, Madam Chair. Just to I suppose, go back when we were deliberating on the annual plan discussions. I think I was the one that put forward that we continue that, and we sort of won a half a day type thing, and it was more around. My thing was more around the funding. So I hope that with the savings, that it's not just swindled away to other kaupapa. I hope it's used in a way that we can re-inject or reinvest rather in particular things that the Te Aka Māori are doing, because it is an important place, not just to me, but to the community. And I do also hear what Councillor Wang is saying, because I'm one of those whānau that go in there with my daughter quite often. So even though that it seems pretty straightforward to me, so I will still be supporting it, but I would hope that there's something done that's Te Aka Māori specific with our savings. That's all I'll say. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Wari. We've heard 3 councillors in favour and we've heard 1 against. I'm going to put the motion on this. One final quick comment, Councillor Lee.
1 against. I'll support Councillor Wang on this one, and just mention that I noticed there isn't an option 3, which is the reinstatement of Sunday. I think it would be helpful in general terms if staff could present all of the options that could be available on any given item. But yeah, I went to the library on a Sunday, and it's a hive of activity, and one of the important things was that tourists who are waiting for buses were able to use it as a nice place to hang out, and young families as well. So I think Sunday would be the better option.
Okay, thank you. I'm now going to put that motion. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please raise their hands. Against? That
Can I have that recorded, please?
is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Julianne and Anaru. Anaru will stay in place and we will move on to the Community Wellbeing Progress Report. Can I have a mover and a seconder that the report be received? Thank you, Councillor Barker, seconded by Councillor O'Brien. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, thank you, carried. Anaru, your report, you'll overview your report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'll take the report as read. The only additional thing I would add, because there's been some commentary already this morning around PARS, draft PARS, and that is correct information, is that it will be coming to you in September, is that we haven't received the Rotorua Housing temporary dashboard yet, and we are expecting that in the not too distant future, and we'll share that with you. And also to note that within JP's presentation after mine here is that he will talk to an update in regards to emergency housing. So I'm happy to take questions.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora Anaru. Page 44, there's a comment there that says all of government group is undergoing a reset. Can you explain what that means, please?
Yes, certainly, Councillor Patterson. So the all of government group, which you have the Public Service Commissioner Ezra Schuster leading, since COVID has been more ad hoc than formal, and so within the reset of that group is to ensure that the priorities for Rotorua are being addressed within that forum with the leaders across the public service. So, example, the strategic priorities that have been identified there are community safety, the Rotorua Housing Accord, family harm intervention, and also education to employment. And so it's a reset of that group, making sure those are the strategic priorities and also looking at the membership of that group.
Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? No, don't appear to be any. Oh, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair. Thank you, Anaru, for your report. Could I just ask on, page 37 of our agenda, it says rough sleeping has decreased slightly. Could I just ask, so 14 in June compared to 17 in May. So where did those figures come from? Is that from people, is that from the police or our staff or support staff? What's the background to those numbers? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Those reductions are anecdotal and captured by our staff. So this is our community safety guardians, and I can certainly talk to you about that offline, if that was amicable.
Sorry, Madam Chair. What I suppose what I want to know is when you say it's anecdotal, so do we have staff working through till, patrolling the government gardens at 2 o'clock in the morning, etc. Teams? Thank you.
No, we don't. Not at 2 a.m. in the morning. However, they are, deployed relevant to day shift, late shifts into the evening. And we certainly are capturing information that, in regards to rough sleepers. And if we get any information from police, we certainly use that information as well.
Okay. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Anaru, thank you for the report. Just the night markets, can you tell me whether the ratepayer subsidises that or is that self-sufficient in terms of revenues? Sorry to land that one on you.
Is it JP's going to answer that?
Madam Chair, I probably can give the short answer to that. Yes, there is. One of the reasons why it is because of things like road closures and the level of security we put around the night market. So again, we've chosen a location because it's about activation within the city. So we did take on board that there is some base costs that make it more expensive to operate out of a street environment than say picking a field or a park in which to place a market.
Could we see a profit loss of some description in a future report, please? Thank you.
I'll just note that as an action point. Any further questions for Anaru? Anaru's report? No, don't appear to be any. Thank you very much, Anaru, for your report. Just wait for a changeover. We'll move on now to the District Development Progress Report. Ask for a move and a seconder that the District Development Progress Report be received. Moved Councillor Patterson, seconded Councillor Barker. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, thank you, carried. Welcome again, JP, and also welcome to Simon.
Morning, everyone. Just in attendance with me today is Simon Bell, our Development Support Manager. I just thought it was really important for us, so really taking our report as read, but taking this opportunity probably to just give you a bit more information about the additional investment of effort and support we provide to commercial and housing development projects outside of our statutory responsibilities around consenting. So Simon's got a little bit of a presentation to take us through. So unlike with Steph, I won't steal any more of what he might say, and I'll conclude.
Thank you, JP. Kia ora koutou, through you, Madam Chair. Firstly, thank you for the time today. It's been a long while since I've appeared in front of the committee, so it's a bit of a privilege. As JP did say, I'm the Development Support Manager. I manage a small function in Council. There's just the two of us, myself and my colleague Melanie Cameron, who's our Senior Urban Designer. And really just wanted to take 5 to 10 minutes to let you know what we've been up to, what we're achieving, how excited myself and Melanie are about what we're doing. So I guess where we started as a council, we are traditional council with a set of issues like any other council. We had our challenges, and that started with a history of low growth, or a period of low growth. We had been through periods where there was extreme high growth as well, but prior to establishing this, we had a history of lower growth. We had a restrictive district plan, and that is also being addressed through our Plan Change 9 and some other planning provisions. We had a lack of investment in infrastructure and growth, and because we had low growth, we didn't have the need to invest at the time. A number of land-based constraints, so we do have, I like to say we live in a volcano, and we have some issues because of that. And there's a range of land-based issues that come with that. Our community not necessarily used to growth, and a limited private sector capability and capacity. So we had our consultants, our developers, not very many of them, not particularly used to large development at the time. Very much a standard council approach to development, which is being quite reactive. So we wait essentially for an application to come in the door, and we assess it as part of our regulatory planning process. We also had a housing affordability issue. So those were our challenges, and that was where we started and wanted to make ourselves an easier place to develop. This is kind of what our development pathway at the time looked like, and you'll notice that what I've tried to demonstrate here is the blue boxes are where council touched the process, so where we're involved. So we had a duty planning service, then it's largely left up to the developer, the landowner, to go away and think about design, infrastructure constraints, and it comes back to council as a pre-lodgement application, and it goes through the standard process, but not a lot of sort of proactive support up front. Nothing wrong with that, but just the way that it was done at the time, and is very much a traditional kind of response to development by councils. So then JP had a twinkle in his eye, and it was all about trying to make that change, which is when I sort of moved across from the consenting function into development support. And I guess the brief at the time was, we have this issue, a set of challenges, we need to be able to make some momentum into changing those. My role was established. We really started at the bottom, and it was about understanding what we have, what opportunities we have for development, and we mapped those opportunities so we can understand with a bit more confidence when we're approached by a landowner or developer as to how easy or complex it might be to develop that land. A big part of it in the early days was about building relationships, so getting out there and networking and understanding who our major landowners were, who our developers were, who would be interested, who we could bring into town as additional capability to help us with our issue. And also realised that feasibility and due diligence support was a major gap, I guess, in the development pipeline and where council were able to help. So developers and landowners were left dealing with that tricky period before you purchase a site, and we didn't quite have that flexibility up front to help in detail. Now we can do that, and it just gives the developer or the landowner a bit more certainty moving forward. Landowner engagement was the other part of that, and so once we had a relationship with developers and key stakeholders, technical experts and landowners, we were able to connect some of those parties together, which we are now seeing some of those applications lodged as resource consents. There's been a real focus all along with supporting Māori-owned development, and that's because there's a set of unique issues with iwi and multiple owned land, and often they do need that support from council to help unpick those. Master planning and urban design is another thread that was brought into the development support function, and that's where Melanie Cameron comes into play. She's also moved internally from a role in the open spaces team, and so now she is our urban designer. And we're able to help landowners, developers bring their vision to life somewhat. So it's just filling that gap between someone's a twinkle in their eye, a concept in their head, and actually being able to put that down on paper and allowing them to move forward with a solid vision that actually can work from a council constraints perspective. We don't go into planning, that's very specific. And there is a bit of a Chinese wall between what we do in urban design and master planning support and the regulatory function that we have as well. Works particularly well with multiple owned land and iwi, where there are a number of owners and everybody has a different idea around what the outcome might look like. We're able to bring those ideas out of people's heads and put them onto paper, essentially. And the last item there, which is really critical, is intelligence building and reporting. So understanding, we mapped our opportunities, where do they exist, now we're reporting on those, where they're at in terms of the key stages in the pipeline. And so it's left us with a development pathway that looks quite different to where we started. There's a lot of upfront support there, and you'll notice the blue boxes on the top there, there's a lot more touch points for council. I talked about reporting earlier, and I just want to be really clear about this slide. The intention here is to show that we know we have a housing issue, and we're starting from a point of a deficit. But critically, the orange line in that first chart graph there is to demonstrate the opportunities that we've mapped and how we understand those opportunities, not the number of houses that are being realised at the end of it. So if I go through some statistics, we know through our HBA that we have a deficit of about 1,500 houses, and we also know that over time, cumulatively, that gets further and further away each year. The response to that is that we've been able to understand and map and work with landowners and developers on about 5,000 potential houses or lots. Now that's just potential opportunities, not houses on the ground or consents. But it's showing that there is a response by council and development support, but also that we have these opportunities, which is encouraging. I think, interestingly, I tried to provide the two pie graphs to show you a bit of context around where we're at in terms of the stages of development and actually land ownership. So the one on the left-hand side there shows those opportunities that we have mapped and we understand, and those are sitting at about 63%. So we have about just over 3,000 of those opportunities in the system. We're either working with a landowner, developer. There is some sign of that development, that opportunity being realised. Is how we've categorised that. And the rest of that pie graph shows you the consenting stage and the construction stage. That's as broad as an application that is ready to lodge through a pre-application process. So it is not every application in the system in a consent, if that makes sense. When you look at what's been delivered on the ground, you'll understand that the issue is far broader than just a council, district development, development support and consenting issue. It's about getting capacity in the whole development pipeline, because we've only delivered in the last 2 years approximately 250 to 300 houses each year. So it just shows you the work that needs to be done to make sure there's capacity in the rest of that system. On the right-hand side, we're showing housing outcomes and active developments. It's opportunities really by ownership type. And I think the interesting thing there is private owners and private developments are about 62%. We have Māori land, which is multiple owned Māori land, and also general title Māori land at about 25%, and Kainga Ora developments at about 7%, I think. Probably will all know around our commitments under the IAF, and that was a solution to one of our major constraints, which was stormwater. As part of our application, we submitted in our application that we thought we had capacity for around 3,000 houses in that catchment, so on the western and the central catchments. And we've done a similar exercise in the central and western catchments, mapping the opportunities, understanding where we're at and what capacity we have. And we are very close to that now with real projects. 10 applications in the IAF area that are major applications, so 20 lots or more, and that equates to 670 houses that are imminent, either in consenting or likely to be lodged soon. So again, just shows you that there is a response to that, and we're not too far off, but a lot of work needs to be done in terms of capacity building to actually make sure those houses arrive on the ground. Pretty tricky to measure success for us, but I've tried to pull a few things out. We are currently supporting 29 major developments, so that's a development that's 20 houses or more. Of those, we have 12 Māori-owned residential developments. Encouragingly, some of those are in consenting. Just a comparison to where we were at just prior to me leaving my resource consenting role. In 2020, we had about 250 lots in pre-lodgement. So that really means 250 lots in terms of our known capacity. And now we have well over 3,000. So I'd like to think that that's because of some of the change in direction from just being reactive to being a bit more supportive and proactive at the front end. A range of housing typologies, which is really encouraging. We now no longer have just the quarter-acre dream. We have a range of typologies that suit different requirements across the housing spectrum. Interestingly too, pre-lodgement conversations remain quite strong, and when we compare that to some of our colleagues in other councils, they're not as strong, and so that's sort of in a market where there's been a bit of a downturn, that's still really encouraging. A real significant increase in the number of major developers as well. We never really had a pipeline that included a huge amount of nationally significant developers, and we do now, and they are showing increased interest in not just one-off developments, but building a pipeline for themselves over 10, 20, 30 years or more. There's been some investment from those developers in local building capabilities, so the real issue is around getting these houses built, and they will start to build their own capacity and capability, which in turn creates jobs and helps us get there faster. Being an ex-planner, I think some of the critical issues is around having really good quality applications, and part of our role is to try and make sure when they land on the council planner's desk, they are as ready to go as possible. And I think I've touched on this earlier, but most of our developers are committing longer term, and we've got a little snippet down the bottom there just to say that a couple of our developers are actually relocating to.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Thank you, Simon. Just reconnecting Councillor Waru on Zoom. We'll just take questions at this point for Simon on his presentation.
I'm here, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Do you have any questions, Councillor Waru? I'm just taking questions at this stage on Simon's presentation before we move on to JP's report. Councillor Patterson.
No, I just thank you for the report.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Simon and JP. Page 48 of our agenda, development support, I think you touched on it, 29 residential developments in pre-lodgement phase prior to lodging resource consent, and 10 of these major developments are in the central and western stormwater catchments, and will benefit from funding from the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, 10 projects yielding 670 houses or lots. Can you explain how these will benefit from the IAF? Is this money that's allocated to RLC that will be utilised to enable these developments, or is it for stormwater projects that RLC is undertaking that will provide to the flow-on benefit to those developers?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, it is that. So the stormwater projects out of the IAF will provide more capacity in the system for developments like those 10 to be consented without having an effect essentially downstream in those known areas where there are currently flooding. So it's about building network capacity for all developments, actually.
Supplementary. So with these developments and the IAF funding, has that been previously signalled in any publications by council saying we are doing this? Is there any?
It is actually, some of them are identified in the applications to the IAF fund, so that document has been released. So there is some sites that are identified within those different catchments, and part of that agreement was also to seek developer agreements about their commitments to proceed on some of those projects. If I give an example that is specifically about ourselves, that way I'm not breaching any commercial or talking about any other developer. The decision made by this council to seek registrations of interest and to sell 61 Kawaha Point Road, which is that piece behind the Waikiri Rugby Club, is an example of where a potential development will go. So someone is seeking to purchase that land from us through that RFP process. They'll develop some homes, but actually that's an area of the city where we have some existing stormwater constraints and problems. There is also developments proceeding in that area which would also benefit from investment, which has been identified in that IAF funding. So stormwater improvements in that Kotu area would support our development site and developments at Ian Street, Frank Street, and equally also the rugby club's own decisions around its second field that we've talked about previously. So just within that area is a specific project that we identified within that IAF funding. I think it was $3 million to support stormwater improvements in that area to support housing developments.
Thank you.
Okay, so questions just on Simon's report? No further questions? Councillor Barker, followed by Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Simon, for your report. It was really interesting and good to see the new development pathway that's been developed. And I notice from the diagram there's a lot more touch points, as you mentioned, with Rotorua Lakes Council. My question is, how is this impacting on the planning and consenting team? Is it placing pressure? Do we have capacity? You know, those sorts of concerns.
Through you, Madam Chair. Look, it is a pretty simple answer. It is impacting on them. Most of the applications are complex because they are more major. There's a high level of consideration around the outcome, making sure that the outcome is a really good one from an urban design perspective. But it is essentially opening the funnel. So we are creating a problem downstream. The consenting team are doing a great job trying to keep up with that, but it becomes a flow-on effect for them, for the building consent team, but also for the private sector in terms of their capability to deliver on that.
Probably a specific response to that is we've got some current vacancies, and I think we've signalled previously that nationally there's a shortage of engineers and planners, so we are carrying vacancies. So the load coming through is in excess of what our current staffing complement can deal with. So we have those vacancies we're trying to fill. We are also then, as a consequence, required and needing to use external consultants to deliver some consent processing for us. So we put a number of consents out for work externally because we just simply don't have enough internal capacity.
Thank you. Just good to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for your report. You say that you've received 105 submissions on the future development strategy.
We'll just take the questions for Simon's report at this stage. Is this relevant to Simon or is this relevant to JP's report?
Well, I jumped in. Okay.
Do you want to just wait till we'll get to... Okay, thank you. So we're just taking questions on Simon's report. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you for your indulgence, Madam Chair. Sorry, I meant to ask you, in your different graphs that you showed, which was the development pathway previously, and then we have the new development pathway with the current system that you've implemented, I noted that there's 6 touch points there, and yet on the new one, there's quite a significant increase in that, almost double. It's a cheeky question. Does that cost the developer every time they connect with us?
No. Through you, Madam Chair, no. Currently, no, it does not cost the developer. It is a service that we provide for free. There are some limitations around that because we've had to make sure that we aren't replacing our friends in the private sector in terms of their technical support, but we think we're within our sticking in our lane in terms of the support we provide.
Very good, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How does a developer start the process with you if they're interested? If there's anyone out there listening, do they phone up Simon Bell and say, I need your help? Well, how does that work?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, I mean, they can contact me. I won't give my number out just at the moment. But yeah, they can. And look, I would hope that if anybody approaches the customer centre, they would know to refer them to myself or to Melanie as well. So we are, like to think we are connected with most of our major developers, but we still do have new developers to town that are looking for support. So yes, would welcome them with open arms.
Thank you. Councillor Wara, I'll come to you in a minute. Your Worship, I think you have an apology for an early departure.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And through you, and please with your, just allow me to say a very quick comment. Thank you very much. Apologies, I do need to leave now to open the Tourism Export Council, but I wanted to thank Simon Bell and actually acknowledge the significant amount of feedback that I have had, not only from developers but also our business community, on how incredibly invigorating it is to have these changes in council and to be able to work alongside you and your team. And the feedback that I've received is, in the past, it was very difficult to engage with council. It was very timely, which obviously resulted in it being very costly for them at the end of the day. So the work and effort that you and the team are putting in has been much appreciated. And of course, we as a council look forward to the final result, which will be more developments and more homes for our people, and hopefully more affordable homes as well. So thank you very much for your work. Thank you, Madam Chair, and apologies, colleagues.
Thank you. Mayor Tapsell will note your apologies for an early departure. Councillor Wara, your question for Simon.
Yes, kia ora, Madam Chair, thank you for your indulgence. Kia ora, Simon. Again, just wanted to touch base with you around one of your slides there where it had, I think it was housing outcomes in active developments by ownership type around the land. Is that just, or can you expand on that a bit more rather, is that just around current developments, or is that inclusive of potential developments moving forward?
Yes, yeah, it's those opportunities that we have mapped and we understand in more detail, and it's just the breakdown then of who owns the land based on a percentage around those opportunities. So 62% is private, and the rest is a mixture of multiple owned Māori land, council owned land actually, and Kainga Ora owned development. But just to be clear, that's not number of houses being delivered, that's opportunities that we've mapped.
Thank you. Now I'm clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think, Simon, we've exhausted our questions for you. I think we're back to JP and your report. So thank you, Simon, for the work that you do, and I echo the comments that the Mayor has made. It's been great to have you and your team on board, and it's made a real difference in terms of the confidence for our developers in the city.
Thank you.
JP, back to you.
Madam Chair, I probably just had one other piece of information I just wanted to share, and it might, no doubt it will come up in questioning because it always does, just around motel use for emergency housing. So I just picked up on this slide here, and I just thought it was worth trying to capture some of the data we've been seeing in the monthly dashboards. the government partners that the Accord, as part of the Accord, HUD, Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, and MSD have a number of motels they have been using for emergency housing. So specifically, if you go back to September on this graph, you can see the numbers of motels that were being used by those two government departments, or funded by those two government departments, to provide places for emergency housing. So I think at that time the number is about 50. I think you can read there on the left, 50 is the number. So the blue zone is the uncontracted motels that the Ministry of Social Development had a relationship with and were using to place people who needed emergency housing. So that was part of our landscape when you look back over the last few years that had developed a significant number of motels being used. So that's the MSD emergency housing motels that were being used. I've kept the orange boxes there with the number 13 is the 13 consented and contracted motels that was done by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development for families and children. So that's the 13 motels. And obviously they've been in place for a while and operating, and there was a number of conditions that were set around their operation. So that's part of our landscape. And previous to them being consented, they were being operated in the city as well, and they were part of quite a significant number pre-September 2022. And the last three at the top of that little stack are what was considered to be the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development's separate ones, which was loosely picked up as the COVID motels. So there was three of those as well. So if you look at that was the composition in the reports that we received back in September. Again, I put the emphasis on those that had a direct relationship with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and MSD. And since then, as we've gone through the monthly reporting, and Anaru just touched on it, we haven't received the final July report yet. So but I've got an awareness, I think, of pretty accurately of what those numbers are. So hence the July to be confirmed stack at the end. So across this period, and really led out of a lot of work through the Housing Accord process, has been that reduction of approximately 50% of the motels being used by HUD and MSD directly for emergency housing. And as we've talked about previously, that has been a focus on exiting the uncontracted motels as much as possible. So that's why the blue stack is the one that goes down significantly. Those that have the consent and the management frameworks around them are the ones that have been almost ring-fenced as saying, hey, that's the better environment for families and children, and that's why that stays the same. Those are the ones that are contracted through till December 2024. So that's just a feel then for those motel changes. What the regulatory department, Anaru's team and my team have been doing is, as motels have been exited, there's been a process of trying to get to the owner and the operator, inspect them and see that they've actually exited from emergency housing, confirm that in writing, and advise them that they would need a consent or a change of use if they were to go into a different activity, and try and just manage them back into that process. So when you look across the city, you can see a number of them have reduced, either reopened as tourist facilities, are going through renovations. So a lot of them are in that renovation stage as our tourism starts to pick up. But probably the biggest issue for Anaru and myself and our regulatory teams is those that are not in a good state and are not seeking to return to tourism. So those are the ones that we talk to about the market pivot, where they're heading off into seeking to undertake tenancies. So that's really the area we're putting most of our focus on, is as they come off the blue stack, we're just making sure as much as possible we can put the pressure on them to make sure they are consented if they want a different use, or they return to tourism. Again, we're working closely with our government partners, particularly MB, in trying to bring them to the table around their tenancy services to make sure if there has been that change in use that we're capturing it and we're identifying a pathway for them to either get the appropriate consents make the appropriate changes to their building or return to their consented use, which is as a tourism facility. So happy to answer off any questions, and Anaru might join me for that, or deal with any other questions in my report.
Okay, thank you. I think we had Councillor, you had a question on the FDS, did you, which relates to this part of the report, if you want to put that to JP now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I missed that very small sentence in there that distinguishes the other report. So FDS, 105 submissions received on FDS. How many of those refer to MDRS or are opposed to MDRS?
Councillor, I don't have the analysis. I can't give you that off the top of my head. I think there's a summary material that we're circulating to the Joint Committee of all submissions. I can circulate it to all councillors for their information. But certainly there is a mix of issues raised around future development. And so, yeah, it's an issue that appears amongst many.
Okay. How would a change of government affect MDRS and PC9?
In a committee room like this, we have no idea what that would look like. A number of parties have come out with their policies, but I would question whether any of them would singularly have a view of what that might look like post-election. So I wouldn't want to comment on what that changes might be.
Well, have you not looked into the National Party MDRS
Councillor
policy?
Lee, I don't think that's an appropriate question for the staff to answer in a committee here. So do you have any other questions relating to the report?
No, ma'am.
Any other questions, councillors, for JP or Anaru in relation to this report? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report again, gents. Partnership developments that we have, you touched on one before, 283 Clayton Road and 61 Kawaha Point Road. Has any consideration been given to pensioner housing for being included in any of those?
Yes, it was kept open. That there was some opportunity to do that, and I understand that one of the registrations of interest around the Kawaha Point site did mention that. Unfortunately, that did not proceed through to the final decision on that proposal, but we have had approaches from some of the key philanthropic trusts in the Bay of Plenty who are keen to directly start talking about opportunities around pensioner housing and pensioner housing development, so we'll be pursuing those.
Thank you. And another question regarding the graph that we were just looking at previously with the housing accord. Just remind me again, where did the backpackers and camping grounds fit into that mix?
If you look at some of the ones that have been exited quite early, so when we had that much longer list of motels, the blue stack, some of those were being used as backpackers accommodation was part of that early use. Most of those have been exited. I don't believe there's any left in the 11 current MSD motels that are being used. And that's really left them in a situation where they've sat in this in-between zone of do they return to tourism or do they look at it being a boarding house or operating as a boarding house. So actually that's an area of particular focus for us. So we're talking to some of those government agencies about an approach that we can take to the approximately 10 backpackers in and around the city, which are being used for a mixed approach.
Thank you. I mean, given that the international markets are slowly coming back online and we're going to be having more international students coming through, according to the latest report from Te Whatu Ora, is it?
Te Pukenga?
Yeah, to Pukenga, that they're actually having a massive influx of international students. We may need those backpackers back to service that demand. Just carrying on from that, talking about our perception as a brand for our city, there is a blight on Fenton Street that's been there for over a year. I'm not going to name it, but when is that going to be cleaned up? I mean, the fire was so long ago. It's been tagged now, and the building itself is awful to look at. When is that going to be sorted?
I think you're describing a fire-damaged motel on Fenton Street. I'm not aware of what the information is about, whether they've lodged a consent or what their process is moving forward. So I can actually find out some more information and feed that to you if we've received anything about that site.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Fellas, do you think we've got the tools and rules, bylaws, planning rules to really tackle with the ones that are going back to tenancies? I think we all recognise that it's an issue. Do we have grounds to start getting tough with these people?
I think the answer is yes from a pure planning perspective. It gets a bit harder when we're talking about the backpackers and boarding house approach. So we're doing some work now, and so the answer is a yes-ish. The piece that we actually require is some assistance from government, and specifically MB around tenancies. They're the ones who should be helping us see enforcement around healthy homes requirements, if that's appropriate, and then we can cover the other side of that equation, which is the resource consenting and Building Act requirements. So we actually need to get that joined up approach. At the moment, it's pretty hard going it alone, and so we're certainly looking to reach out to MB now to work more closely with us on our regulatory approach.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the Chair. Thank you, gentlemen. JP, could I ask, quoting from regarding 61 Kawaha Point Road, quoting your report, further information is being sought from the remaining 3 responders to inform a final recommendation on the preferred development proposal. Now, sorry, I take it this may have been written some time ago. Can you give us any update on that? Is it still being discussed, or has it moved on since the time of this report?
We've come back as officers. If you remember, the resolution was delegated to the Chief Executive and the Chair of this committee to make a decision about the preferred candidate to purchase in the development proposal. We presented that to the Chair and the Chief Executive this morning at that point, so they've endorsed our recommendation of who the successful candidate is. We're now going to go into a process of preparing that documentation, but we'll be looking to come back and giving you a briefing on that preferred or successful RFP at the next meeting.
I see, thank you. And just as a follow-up, could I ask regarding the sale of 283 Clayton and Kawaha Point Road, assuming that goes ahead, where will the funding go from that? Thank you.
Clayton Road was a revoked piece of reserve, so it was a reserve that was revoked in the early 1980s, I think was when we originally identified that one for disposal. Because it had been acquired and because it had been a reserve, the funds will return to our reserve fund, reserve fund, for investment into reserve developments or land purchases. So that's for the Clayton Road site. Kawaha Point piece of land was freehold. And if you recall, in our resolution, we proposed that we would we'd either invest the proceeds of that land sale for housing directly into a road connection, so that joins Frank Street through to Kawaha Point Road, or have a reduced price on the land if the developer would do that as part of the development. So we're trying to get an enhanced roading outcome. The remainder or residual funding from the sale of that property would be available to us in the consolidated funds, but we had also signalled in that resolution that if Waikiri Rugby Club sold and disposed of their second field, we would use some of the proceeds from our 61 Kawaha Point sale to develop a second field for the club and for the community on Boyles Park, which adjoins the Waikiri Rugby Club. So for us, it was this intention to sell our piece of land, which is freehold, to achieve improved roading network, it's part of the picture with the stormwater improvements and enhancements, but also enhance the actual sports field provision for the club and the community with that second field that would be on the council part of the reserve.
Any further questions, councillors? No, there don't appear to be any. Thank you very much, Anaru and JP. I think we'll take the luncheon adjournment now. We still have a few things to get through in the confidential section of the meeting, so perhaps if we could adjourn now till 1:30. Actually, I'll just, so Una can close off the Zoom link from the public perspective. I think we'll just take the motion to move into public excluded, and then when we come back after lunch, we can just carry straight on. So I have to read these bits out. We are going to move into confidential after lunch for 3 items for consideration, which are the confidential minutes from this committee on the 12th of July, the appointment of board members and chairperson for the Rotorua Regional Airport, and the report on transformational projects. The reasons are to protect the privacy of natural persons, including that of deceased natural persons, protect information where making available of the information would be likely unreasonably to prejudice the commercial position of that person who supplied or is subject of the information, and to enable any local authority holding the information to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage negotiations, including commercial and industrial negotiations. It's been moved by Councillor Waru, it's seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you, carried. We will take the luncheon adjournment, resume at 1:30.